Okay.
Take our seats. Take our seats.
All right, we're going to get started with Senate Bill 1006. Senator Kagan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, colleagues. For the record, Cheryl Kagan, very proud to be the senator for Gaithersburg and Rockville, and the senator representing this body on the Maryland State Arts Council. I'm going to say before I start, this bill has no fiscal note. Second, it already passed the House overwhelmingly. So those are the two first good things that I wanted to share. Everyone knows that public art enriches our community, literally and figuratively. It makes them more beautiful. It draws economic development. People come, enjoy the art, and then they go out for dinner and stay in a hotel, blah, blah, blah. The problem is that we don't give enough support for our artists. And I'm just going to highlight, and Pam Wood is very excited that I am going to mention a Baltimore banner piece. In 2023, an enormous sculpture in Baltimore City disappeared one night. Disappeared. And this bill would make sure, as amended by the House, we like the House amendments, that all public art, first off, is registered with the Maryland State Arts Council. The artist's name and contact information and all that would be accessible. So goodness knows if something like this were to happen again, the artist would have recourse and the hope of getting it back again. But the other thing that it does is removes the sort of sword of Damocles that is too often used with public art, saying you have to waive your copyrights in order to get this commission. And there are some times where that makes sense when the art is going to be incorporated into a building, it's going to be permanent or something like that. But other than that, I think we can give a little more respect, a little more love to our artists and offer some flexibility. So this isn't a controversial bill. Again, no cost, no opposition. Happy to take any questions.
Questions for the sponsor? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you all.
Senate Bill 1000.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. For the record, I'm Shelley Hedelman from District 11. I am here today in support of Senate Bill 1000. And this has to do with a transfer of a gaming license. If you remember, back in 2020, November, Maryland voters approved legislation legalizing sports betting through a constitutional amendment. And the following year, we also created the Sports Wagering Application Review Commission, SWARC, which would grant sports betting licenses to facilities on a non-competitive basis. That means without a lottery, and determine licensing requirements. SWARC confers two different kinds of licenses: Class A licenses for sports stadiums, casinos, and horse racing licenses, and Class B for specific horse racing, off-track betting, and specific bingo halls. SWARC can competitively confer, with a lottery, 30 additional Class B licenses, which are currently held by a handful of local bars and restaurants. The problem is that under the current law, there's no mechanism for relocating a competitively licensed Class B facility. For instance, if a restaurant with a Class B license were to move to a different location, the restaurant would have to forfeit its license to the State Lottery and Gaming Control Commission. This bill, Senate Bill 1000, aims to resolve this regulatory oversight by allowing a competitively conferred Class B license holder to request license relocation from the State Lottery and Gaming Control Commission. It wouldn't allow these license holders to relocate their facilities to a different county. Class B license holders wishing to relocate must abide by all existing radius conditions in the current law, and that's it. All this bill does is allow that flexibility for this one particular license that meets all the other requirements that the original license was held to. That is the end of my testimony. I'm happy to answer any questions or turn it over to my
Are you there for information or?
No, thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, members of the committee. Jason Weintraub here on behalf of Canton Gaming in support of Senate Bill 1000. Canton Gaming has two Class B retail sports books, one at the Towson Green Turtle in Baltimore County and one in Canton in Baltimore City. They are merely looking to relocate the physical location of their Towson sportsbook to a bar and restaurant in Pikesville. And as part of that process, Lottery has said that they need additional regulatory flexibility to review that request. And that's merely all that the bill does. We would ask for a favorable report, and thank you all for taking this bill second.
One other question, one other issue. There is a small amendment that should be before the committee, and that was asked for by the Lottery and Gaming Commission. And we're good with it.
Okay. Questions? Senator Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator, I thought I heard you say that they cannot move it between counties. It has to stay within the county or the city of its existence.
Yeah, this is all in the county.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Okay. Senate Bill 1045, Sales and Use Tax, Business Services. I want to welcome the Senate President, who is joining us back in his old committee, where he served as the vice chair years ago. Yeah, well, you were up here, too. Yeah, yeah, oh, that's that, yeah. Right. Well, let's give you a new perspective. Senator, whenever you're ready.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the Budget and Tax Committee. For the record, I'm Shelley Heddleman, Senator from District 11, and I'm here today to present Senate Bill 1045, which would create a sales and use tax, business-to-business tax. We are living in pretty extraordinary times, and I'll just ask for your indulgence because I do think we need to set some context for what the times in which we are considering this piece of legislation. We're living in extraordinary times, not only in this country, but also in this state. And we're all aware when beginning this legislative session that we needed to close a budget gap. The governor introduced a budget that recognized this reality and put forth a proposal that included $2 billion worth of cuts and $1 billion in revenue. And now it is up to this committee and to the entire General Assembly to pass a balanced budget that reflects the values of this body. That is our job, to make the difficult choices and the difficult decisions before us. I do not want to raise taxes, and I'm guessing that neither do each of you. But I will tell you what I do want. I want to provide the residents of this great state with schools that will educate our children well. I want to provide pregnant moms with doctors who will ensure that they can safely deliver those babies in hospitals that are prepared to deal with emergencies that arise. I want a sound and solid shock trauma system, the envy of the world, where nearly 20 years ago a member of my family was airlifted and treated after a horrible car accident. I'm incredibly proud of the University System of Maryland and our entire community of higher educational institutions who produce amazing scientists and discover the vaccine for COVID, who invented CPR, who landed the first spacecraft on an asteroid and are at the front of curing disease. I want all of these things and more for my children, for my granddaughter, and for all Marylanders. And I have to say that all of this has been made all the more difficult in the past 6 weeks by this new administration, as Elon Musk and the president and his Doge wrecking ball have wreaked havoc on our state and our nation. And just 2 days ago, Moody's rating agency stated this, and I quote, "Federal austerity measures, including cuts to U.S. government headcount and office space, pose a greater threat to Maryland than to any other state. Maryland ranks at or near the top for risk from changing federal priorities and policies by metrics as diverse as share of federal government employment, scientific research grant funding, and federal contract awards. Federal wages account for more than a fifth of gross income in the state's counties closest to DC, which of course bears more risk to the unfolding changes than any state, unquote. And these data points are seared into my brain. We are home to over 160,000 federal workers, not counting private contractors, over 1,000 of whom have lost their jobs in the last 6 weeks. Roughly 10% of all jobs in Maryland are related to the federal government, and it's estimated that nearly 12,000 federal workers in Maryland have lost their jobs, and we expect that number to reach nearly 29,000. Of course, that has a dramatic effect on our ability to collect revenue. When these well-paid workers are laid off from DEA, from FDA, from EPA, from last night's purge of the Department of Education, they endure the trauma of having their livelihoods upended. And we as a state experience a loss of revenue. And the bad news is compounding, as Moody's also says. Quote, research and health systems that support Maryland's economy also face risks. Less generous federal grant policies may encourage nonprofit research organizations such as Johns Hopkins University to scale back, which could also hurt private companies that are part of the state's scientific research sector. And don't forget real property. We are the proud home to CMS, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid, Social Security, National Institute for Health, the Food and Drug Administration, NOAA, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NIST, Joint Base Andrews Naval Air Force Base, Naval Air Facility, Pax River Naval Air Station, and more. And last week's Board of Revenue estimates directly attributed the write-down of nearly $350 million to this chainsaw. And we haven't even discussed the whiplash of the on-again, off-again tariffs that earlier this week resulted in trillions of dollars of loss in the stock market. And consumer confidence is tanking. And here we are 2 days out from a deadline of when Congress is supposed to come to a budget deal or face a shutdown. And we don't know what will happen. Included in the budget resolution passed by the House is more flexibility how this administration will be able to operate and spend. And they have not been shy about their plans to reduce spending on Medicaid. As quoted in the Washington Post, Musk suggested that waste and fraud in the programs is, quote, the big one to eliminate. He estimated that $500 billion, maybe $700 billion a year could be saved through eliminating the waste and fraud he claims exists in entitlement spending. The programs cost more than $2.9 trillion in fiscal 24, meaning he's suggesting that up to a quarter of their budget is fraud and waste. 1/4 of entitlements? I don't think so. The Trump administration and Congress are seeking to significantly cut federal funding for states, and unfortunately, it's maybe likely that this extreme goal can only be accomplished by reducing funds for vital health care services in states across the country. States that elected to participate in the Affordable Care Act are particularly at risk, which we did by expanding Medicaid coverage to individuals with incomes below 138% of the federal poverty level. And in December of 2024, enrollment in the ACA expansion group totaled over 171,000 participants. This group receives a 90% federal match, and if that match were reduced based on DLS baseline forecast, the following amounts would need to be backfilled with state funds to continue that coverage. Over $2.3 billion if the entire 90% federal match was eliminated, or over $1 billion if the enhanced match was reduced to the typical match of 50%. And even if they don't make this change, other federal matching could be reduced, such as for the information technology for the Department of Health. They could introduce other requirements on enrollees, which would reduce Medicaid enrollment by potentially significant amount and increase administrative costs. For every 3.5% reduction in enrollment, the state could backfill those enrollees with $100 million more in state funds. But where do these states come from, and what does that look like? For every $100 million in cuts, just give a couple of examples, 36,000 people who had UI claims would not be paid. Over 36,000 people would lose their food stamps, and over 11,000 people could potentially lose their Medicaid coverage. And as I stated before, none of us likes to raise taxes. And unfortunately, at this moment, we are playing defense, and we need to be advocates for our constituents. for what is happening now and for what is coming. And the reality is that we don't have good choices. The bill before you today is one of the options, among others, that would help to address this shortfall. It is not perfect, and it is not taken lightly, and it is addressing a very real issue that we have been slow to address, and that is the changing nature of our economy. The proportion of the economy that relies on the purchase of goods has steadily declined over time. Developing economies tend to be goods-based. However, as technology and efficiency improve manufacturing, the economy tends to move towards services, and ours has. In general, the sales tax became a revenue tool for states around the 1930s and expanded post-World War II. At that time, goods and services made up roughly equal shares of the economy, 50% goods, 50% services. And since then, services have grown as the dominant component of economic consumption. According to the Federal Reserve, by 1997, Maryland's economy was comprised of 37% goods and 63% services. 25 years later, Maryland's economy was 31% goods and 69% services. By this measure, our state's revenue structure is woefully outdated. The sales tax is the second largest source of Maryland's revenue, comprising over 24% of revenues. But it does not make sense to have a quarter of the state general fund be shouldered by only 31% of the economy. The businesses and consumers that produce and purchase the state's goods should not have to carry the entire burden. So this bill, Senate Bill 1045, can be viewed as part of a broader tax reform and budget strategy aimed at addressing the $3.3 billion general fund shortfall we now face, greater than any shortfall in at least 20 years, including the Great Recession. It would raise significant funds in FY26, $943.6 million in year one, growing to $1.3 billion in FY27, significantly contributed to closing the gap in the state's budget. This is achieved by expanding the definition of taxable services to include business-related services by imposing a sales and use tax at 2.5% of the taxable price if both the provider and the buyer are businesses. The expansion creates a diversified revenue stream beyond property and sales tax, providing a stable source of income even during economic downturns. It clarifies which business services are taxable using the North American Industrial Classification System, NAICS for short, that is widely used to standardize business classifications. And nonprofits should be exempt from the impacts of this bill, as the Comptroller's Office issues sales and use tax exemption certificates to qualifying organizations, allowing them to make specific purchases without paying sales and use tax. And these are renewed every 5 years. Maryland has few alternatives to address the budget shortfall. Without new revenue sources, critical programs like the ones we have considered in this very committee, services to individuals who have disabilities, including many of our constituents that we have spoken with over these past many weeks, who are terrified about what not having funding to care for their severely disabled children may mean. Cuts that may prevent individuals with serious mental illness from being able to access crisis services, cuts that may eliminate programs for supported housing, throwing folks onto the streets, or pare back health care to those recently covered under the Affordable Care Act. To maintain essential services and to support Maryland's growth, we must find ways to increase revenue without burdening struggling residents. And we must remember that these revenues support businesses too. They provide the array of services we offer to small business. They provide funding to schools that business leaders tell us are so important to their workers. They provide the accessible health care where no one is turned away, that supports a healthy workforce that is able and reliably shows up for work. It supports programs that train workers for a variety of industries and supports apprenticeships and service opportunities. And it provides predictability, a quality sorely lacking right now at the federal level that business leaders tell us that is so important to their planning and decision-making. To this committee and to the many individuals waiting to share their thoughts and concerns about this bill, please remember that this is one revenue option among many that will be considered by this body. Thank you for your attention, and thank you for your consideration, and I'm happy to answer any questions, and I'm happy to introduce Deborah Gorman from the Comptroller's Office, who is also here to assist.
Thank you. Question, Senator Jennings.
Question, thanks. And maybe the comptroller office can answer this. This goes kind of back to, I remember it was the Wayfair decision that allowed us to go after states for sales tax.
Correct.
Does that include services?
Yes, it will.
So if somebody does go out of state for these services,
If an out-of-state company were to provide the services to someone in Maryland, then the Wayfair thresholds would apply, and they would be required to collect the Maryland sales and use tax.
okay. Thanks. That was my question.
And there are thresholds for that. It's 200 transactions a year or $100,000.
That's correct.
That's the nexus.
Senator Corbin.
There's next.
So just to expand upon that, and I'm having a hard time, I guess, to try to figure out how that exactly would work, per se, particularly in areas of our state that are close to many other states. Obviously, you know where I live, I'm 5 miles from your direction of 2 other states. And so, and maybe to the comptroller, like how does that work though exactly? So where I live, I could go 5 miles over and get a service, but I don't understand how it works, to be honest with you, as far as how we're going to be able to do that with our neighboring states. I mean,
So if I may, I'll try and give a couple
use an example.
examples,
Yeah, that'd be
maybe?
helpful.
Okay.
Yeah.
So something like, the lawn maintenance is going to be done in Maryland. So that's a fairly straightforward one. Something like the IT technology services, if the purchasing company is in Maryland, but the
Right, so
company
I have
selling
a business in
those.
Maryland, and I go to Pennsylvania because there's an IT company 5 miles up the road, and have them do my products, yeah.
Well, you're purchasing from a Pennsylvania company, but they are, if everything's electronic, it's being delivered where the purchaser is. So you're a Maryland business, and many companies already do a combination of goods and services, and they have perhaps digital products that they're selling today, and so they may already be registered. They may be selling things over the threshold. We do anticipate there will be some level of new businesses that are not already registered. They will register to collect Maryland sales and use tax if they anticipate having the sales over $100,000 a year or 200 transactions a year, and they will be required to collect the tax. We anticipate doing a whole lot of outreach at first, if this bill is to pass, to make folks who may not have been registered and collecting before aware of their new obligations. And then beyond that, we have a number of our ongoing compliance programs, from informational to all the way up through to an audit if necessary.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator, you mentioned that these types of companies were chosen through the NAIC ledger. So I'm familiar with at least one on here. I'm wondering how, of the list that's here, why are these chosen versus others?
So I can't say that it was, it was a discussion. There are a lot of cooks in this kitchen, so it was a discussion about what are the business services that could participate most readily. And there are a number of other states that already do service taxes using these particular NAICS codes. It wasn't an art or a science. It was just sort of what makes, it was just a discussion about what might be appropriate. This is certainly, it's certainly up to this group and others to determine whether there are ones that should come out or whether there are others that should be added in.
Thank you.
Other questions from the committee, the sponsor? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. What I'm going to do is just call a bunch of names. And if you hear your name, we've got 6 seats up front. Certainly feel free to jump in. You'll have 2 minutes, and you'll see in front of you, there's a little light system that at, what's it, 10 seconds? About 10 seconds, it turns yellow from green, and then you'll get a sound when your 2 minutes is up. Feel free to finish your thought, and we'll just hopefully move along as quickly as possible. We're pleased that you're all here. Logan Freeman, Megan Stokes. Oh, okay, we'll hold on the virtual then. Aaron Greenfield, Skip Atco. I'm sure we'll come back. I'll give everybody another shot. Clark Rector, Nancy Egan, Darren Clark, Harold Moan, okay. Whoever would like to start, that'd be great.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and committee members. My name is Skip Filatko. I'm a CPA from Baltimore County, and I'm here to express my opposition to Senate Bill 1045. This bill is concerning because, number one, it will harm small businesses who tend to use outside accounting and tax services versus a larger business that has in-house staff to handle those needs. Secondly, it's a tax on a tax where companies will be paying a tax to fulfill their tax obligations and commitments. Third, it imposes a tremendous compliance burden on Maryland businesses, as it's very difficult to source where the sale and delivery of professional services occurs, given remote work, multiple offices, and customers in several states. Fourth, none of our neighboring states tax services, and in a geographically small state like Maryland, this would put us at a competitive disadvantage with those other nearby states. Fifth, the proposed law is not evenly applied and picks winners and losers, and that's not a good approach toward tax policy. And then finally, it's not business friendly and will drive businesses and taxpayers away from Maryland. I believe that other revenue-generating strategies should be explored to ensure fairness, simplicity, and economic growth for all citizens and businesses. And for these reasons, I respectfully request an unfavorable report for Senate Bill 1045. Thank you for your consideration.
Good afternoon, distinguished committee members. My name is Nancy Egan. I represent the American Property Casualty Insurance Association. Our members write 71.4% of the property casualty market here in Maryland. Currently, there are 30 property casualty insurance companies domiciled here in Maryland and 33 property casualty insurance companies that are headquartered here in Maryland. In fiscal year 2023, the insurance industry, which would include property and casualty, life, and health combined, paid $682 million in premium taxes to the state. In comparison to the general corporate tax income, which took in $1.8 billion. So the insurance industry paid over 1/3 of the taxes that nearly all other industries combined paid in 2023. Maryland's premium tax is 2%, which is above average across the country. The new sales tax would make Maryland less competitive and less attractive since insurance cost of doing business, both through the claims and general operating expense, will be higher. This will raise the cost of doing business as well as our claim costs. These companies consider taxes when considering whether to continue to keep their headquarters here in Maryland or whether to relocate to a neighboring state such as Virginia. It would also increase the claim costs associated with heavy truck and bus repairs at times when claim costs and expenses are skyrocketing across the country. The new tax would also translate obviously, into higher expenses for insurance company operating expenses. In the end, it is your consumers and Maryland businesses who will be paying the additional cost in higher premiums at this time of economic difficulty. And for those reasons, we oppose the bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, Mr. President, members of the committee. Aaron Greenfield here on behalf of the Maryland Multi-Housing Association in opposition to Senate Bill 1045. You have our written opposition. I do want to thank the sponsor for really making an effort to try and protect the housing industry as much as possible. As many of you know, the state is facing a dearth of about 96,000 affordable housing units. And we're concerned that any tax, a tax like this, which will hit the industry, will be passed on to the resident in the form of some other fee or tax or rent increase. So some of the services that we are concerned about that will be taxed are landscaping, pest control, snow removal, very responsive, reactionary efforts and measures our members have to take to keep our properties safe and habitable. In fact, one Baltimore area workforce housing provider estimates that this tax will cost them about $3 million a year, which will result in a $24 increase in monthly rent. This on top of BEPS, inflation, insurance, rent control in some jurisdictions, it's making it hard to do business in the state. And for those reasons, we respectfully request an unfavorable report on Senate Bill 1045.
Good afternoon, members of the committee. My name is Clark Rector. I'm with the American Advertising Federation. We're an umbrella organization that represents all parts of the industry, including clients, agencies, and the media, as well as local chapters, including a very strong one in Baltimore. I'm here to remind you of the importance of advertising to the Maryland economy. Advertising's an important driver of economic growth, jobs, and sales, and therefore tax revenue. According to a recent update of a study designed by Lawrence Klein, who won the Nobel Prize in Economics, advertising in 2024 generated almost $94 billion in economic activity in Maryland. It helped support over 469,000, or almost 17% of Maryland jobs, and every single advertising job supports about 28 jobs across multiple industries in Maryland. Increasing the tax of advertising, as this bill would do since advertising budgets are fixed, would lessen all of those benefits and ultimately lessen tax revenue. Advertising is often the only source of revenue for the media. Advertising or consumers are easily reached by media and outlets from outside of Maryland. And so Maryland media is put at a disadvantage, and Maryland agencies are put in a disadvantage as well, as they have to charge a premium for their services when they're going for clients outside the state of Maryland. We've got lots of other objections to that. In the interest of time, I will submit that as a written statement, and thank you for your attention, and we oppose the bill.
Hi, my name is Darren Clark. I own an IT services company called Clark Computer Services, and we're located in Frederick, Maryland, and we've been in business for over 20 years, and we hire approximately 40 Maryland citizens. I'm here to tell you that this proposed tax is a bad idea at a bad time. Due to policy changes at the federal level, I've already lost this year $750,000 in canceled projects that I previously considered secured sales. And the tariffs that's being put in place right now on technology is raising my costs even more. I estimate that those tariffs are going to cost me an additional $320,000 this year. Now with this proposed tax, I'm looking at an additional $120,000 that I'm going to have to pay out. That puts me over $1 million behind this year with a forecast, that I've already planned out and I've already staffed to. I'm now $1 million behind, and I'm a small business. This jeopardizes not only my business's growth, but also my employees' job security. I don't believe that we've recovered from COVID yet, and we certainly haven't recovered from the supply chain disruptions. And new policies put in place are creating chaos. Adding the state taxes on business-to-business services is only making a bad economic situation worse. I implore everyone in this room to vote against this bill because you are worsening an already challenging business climate. Maryland is already ranked as one of the least friendly states to do business in, and this bill is going to push us further down, maybe even let us become last. Please say no to this bill, please. Yeah, I practiced.
Chair and members of the committee, my name is Harold Moan. I'm a CPA, and I'm the Regional Managing Director for UHY in the Mid-Atlantic region. We're a national CPA firm. We have 3 offices in Maryland with over 100 employees. And I recognize the significant budget deficit that Maryland's facing and understand the difficult choices ahead. However, I believe we should remain focused on the principles outlined by the governor, the most important one, which is making Maryland more business-friendly. I have conversations with my clients all the time about potentially moving to other states. I strongly support the governor's goals, particularly the one fostering a business-friendly environment. And there are many reasons why this proposed tax is problematic. You just heard some of them here. But I just want to focus on the economic growth, because that's the only meaningful way to increase revenue over time. Because if you make a short-term decision, I guarantee you that whatever they think they're going to raise in revenue, it's not going to happen, because people will either shut down or they will leave. This SB 1045, targeting business-to-business transaction, will require businesses to pass it on to their residents. Businesses that will face additional expenses, and small businesses will be hit especially hard. They rely on external service providers for accounting, compliance. They tax on all this stuff. This simply does not make any sense and places an undue burden on the very businesses we need to thrive. Further, no other state imposes this type of tax on many of these business services. Enacting such a measure sends a clear message that Maryland is not open for business. Many companies have options: Virginia, Pennsylvania, Delaware, or just a short distance away. If a business that can relocate chooses to do so, Maryland will lose jobs and you'll never get it back. If you don't know, I'm unfavorable on this bill.
For coming to testify. We all know we're in a very difficult economic environment. The sponsor of the bill described many of the attacks from Washington. You described in your own, the gentleman talking about tariffs and supply chain, and I mean, it's a mess in Washington, there's no question about it. The way we're different from Washington is we have to balance our budget, and you all have to balance your budgets in your businesses. And so the governor's made a proposal about $1 billion in revenue. This proposal raises this year, I think, a little less than $1 billion in revenue.
According to the estimate.
Sorry?
According to the estimate.
According to the estimate, yeah. You're an accountant. Everything's an estimate until you see the reality.
That's correct.
Exactly. But we have no reason to believe it's not correct. Where I'm going with this is, if we don't do this, we need to come up with about $1 billion, either in cuts beyond what the governor has proposed, or at other revenue source. So I'd appreciate to know what $1 billion revenue source would you suggest we substitute for it, or what $1 billion worth of cuts you would suggest you replace it with?
I would suggest you look very deep and start making cuts. I mean, you're stifling the economy. I don't know. I'm not in your position to see everything, but I tell you what, if I was sitting there looking at the books, I would find areas to cut. I wouldn't stifle small businesses, and you're going to You're doing a transaction right now versus thinking long-term.
With all due
And you're
respect,
gonna
we are
hurt us
thinking long-term.
No respect
We are
here.
thinking long-term.
You're hurting our businesses.
But you have
and
no
you're hurting the
suggestions.
If you gave me a chance to look at the books, I'd find plenty of suggestions.
I
guarantee you that.
suggest you go online, look at the books. There may be other witnesses who in their written testimony have made suggestions for alternative billion-dollar revenue source of billion cuts. I'd love to hear back from you later this week.
I bet you won't listen.
I will
what
listen.
My bet is to you. I bet you're screaming
definitely
and
listen.
hollering about federal tariffs right now, about how you think that's wrong, but you're putting the same tariffs on us.
These are not tariffs. There's a difference between tariffs
Tariffs,
and
taxes,
sales tax.
same thing. Same
They have different
dang
economic
thing,
effects.
Same
But
thing.
we don't need to settle that question right now, and I appreciate that, Mr. Chairman. But I'm serious about this. I would appreciate anyone who's on this panel. I'm not going to ask this question again, Mr. Chairman, but I'm asking for all the witnesses. If they don't want this, we would definitely appreciate, I think I speak for my colleagues, but I personally would love specific suggestions of alternative revenue sources or cuts.
How much time do we got?
About a week or so.
About a week or so.
Yeah.
Now, that's a ridiculous request.
No, it's not.
It
We
is
have a constitutional
ridiculous
requirement to
request.
pass a balanced budget.
How can I do anything in a week?
I don't
given
know.
All the stuff.
If you can't, you can't. That's
You've had
fine.
years to do it, and you haven't even done it.
With all due respect, I appreciate your passion on this issue.
I think if you were sitting in my business with 40 employees that you might have to start letting go, you would think a lot differently. But you're sitting up on your perch and you're thinking this is easy for us. Most of us are operating on thin margins already, and you're going to make it even
No
worse.
one is thinking this is easy at all for anybody.
With the smile on your face as you were talking to me, you look like you're making
I
it
try to
feel
remain
easy.
cheerful in difficult situations.
Well, then I
Okay.
think
All
you
right,
should
we're going to move
stop.
on.
Thank you.
We're going to move on. We're going to move on. We're going to move on. Any other questions for this panel? Yes, Senator Benson.
Thank each of you for your testimony, for coming here. I've been around here for over 30 years, and I serve on this committee. If you look at the people who are sitting here, we started out in January. There are very few of us who have not been working here almost 7 days a week. And we are looking at any and everything that we can find. And I think that I would strongly suggest that you take the advice that's just been given by this by our vice chair. If you have any suggestions, we are strongly committed to transparency and accountability. That's what we are. We're about the business of taking care of our people. And yes, I have a nephew that's in Frederick, and he has a small business. I am very, very sensitive to the little people. That's why I'm here. So when we start talking about budget and these items, I am definitely committed to small businesses and the little people, the poor people.
Would you
So
like me
I'm going to
respond?
suggest that you take a look at the proposed budget or the bill that's just been given and our budget. And if you all could please give us feedback on what you think we ought to do in the way of balancing this state. One of the finest things that could happen here is that we must balance our budget. And we are not going to leave here until the budget is balanced. And there are some things that we as this committee have to do that we have to hold our nose on. It's very difficult. Let me just tell you. There are those of us who've been up, we were talking this week, today, about having not been able to even go to bed because of the decisions that we have to make here in Annapolis. But we have to do it. So if you have any suggestions that you want to give us, that's going to benefit not only small businesses, but also the deep pockets and the little people, the little working people, let us know, because we are absolutely open to any suggestions that you may want to give. Thank you.
Can I
Mr. Chair.
respond to that?
Just a second. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I don't need to be chastised about it. I'm emotional right now because I've got 40 employees that I have to think about, and I've got a family that I got to think about, and I'm operating on thin margins, and every politician's decision is affecting me right now. If you're upset about me being upset, well, then I don't feel bad about it. And giving us a week and a half to help make suggestions that are going to be substantial to reduce $1 billion or whatever you're looking for us to cut, that's a ridiculous request.
Okay. Well, we appreciate you being here. Appreciate your comments. Thank you all very
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you.
Rebecca Olson, Christopher Wharton, Amy Rohrer, James Stark, Heidi Schmidt, Lori Graff, Paul Nolan, Javante Hawkins, Grayson Wiggins. Whoever would like to begin.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, good afternoon. My name is Amy Rohrer, here on behalf of the Maryland Hotel Lodging Association. We have submitted written testimony in opposition to the proposal in front of you, and I also submitted a Baltimore Banner article titled, "No, Baltimore can't just sell the Hilton Inner Harbor Hotel because it's losing money." This hotel's struggles have been very public, and unfortunately, it is serving as the poster child for the state of the industry in Baltimore City and the surrounding region. And I'm sorry to say that they are not the only hotel struggling, and Maryland's lodging industry is lagging behind other areas of the country. We have not returned to pre-pandemic occupancy levels, and statewide revenue per available room, which is a key benchmark for hotel performance, was more than 13% below the national average for 2024. And while hotel rates have risen, expense has risen at a higher rate. Wages have increased 26% since the pandemic. The cost of goods has gone up with inflation, energy costs are rising, and BEPS is going to require significant investment by hotels to come into compliance. Nearly every service listed in this bill could impact hotels and will make it even more expensive to operate in Maryland. This tax would lessen our competitiveness as a destination in an industry that is highly competitive. And as we potentially lose business to other states, that has a trickle-down effect in Maryland's economy. We've seen more than a few hotels permanently close their doors in recent years, and it's unfortunate when it no longer makes financial sense to operate a hotel as a hotel. This means job losses and less tax revenue for the state. We respectfully urge you to reject this proposal. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Jim Stark. I'm the VP of Hotel Operations for the Best Western Plus BWI Airport at Arundel Mills in Howard County. And I just want to take a minute today, or a minute and a half today, 2 minutes today, to sort of frame what this means for small business. Even though we might have a flag on the side of our building, like a lot of other hotels my size, 133 rooms, average size hotels, 115 in the state of Maryland, we're all small business. And we all have top lines, we all have all the expenses in the middle, and we all have bottom lines. And believe it or not, those bottom lines, those margins, are actually pretty small. A lot of things have happened the last few years with increased labor costs, insurance costs, costs related to implementation of BEPS, other expenses that are going to be coming. July 1st of this year, we're going to have an increased expenses related to the energy delivery. Not only that commercial will feel, but residential folks will feel as well. All of these things baked in are already going to take a huge hit to our margins. You bake into the mix something like this, again, mid-sized hotel, Howard County, Maryland. We're talking tens of thousands of dollars, somewhere between $25,000 and $50,000, depending upon how you rely on the correlated codes. You do all of those things, and with all the respect, unlike government, we can't snap our fingers and change our top line. We have to look at those numbers in the middle because the bottom line matters. It matters to us because you don't run a business to break even or lose money. And also, too, a lot of us have lenders. We have mortgages. And our banks need us to maintain certain ratios. If we don't maintain those ratios, they can either increase our mortgages, they can call the loan, and heaven forbid you can't pay it back. Guess what? Now they have the keys to your hotel, your keys to your business. All of these things factor into the mix of what I get paid to do. And what I get paid to do is when those things I can't control, cost I can't mitigate just because they're going up, they're mandated things that are put on small business, and things I can't pass on to my guests, they can only absorb so much. That's where my job is. I have to look for things to cut. And the long-term ramifications are huge. Short-term, but long-term, and I'll just finish with this. The long-term ramification of the value of the assets, not just my assets, but assets like mine across the state, will have a negative impact on value. And that's all related to what we all pay in real estate taxes too. So it's a snowball effect down the hill that'll affect everyone. Thank you for your time.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, my name is Heidi Schmidt. I'm a small business owner and vice president of the Pasadena Business Association, and I'm here to strongly oppose Senate Bill 1045. While the state clearly faces budget challenges, implementing this service tax would only exacerbate these problems over the long term by negatively impacting the state's economy and business competitiveness, and would disproportionately hurt small businesses like mine, a small marketing agency. Unlike large corporations, small businesses like mine and those in the PBA, we rely heavily on outsourcing professional services for essential business functions. This tax would add thousands in new annual costs for businesses already struggling with economic pressures, potentially forcing difficult choices between raising prices, reducing staff, cutting investments in growth, and ultimately impacting Marylanders and our families. The average median income for small business owners is around $60,000. This proposal would directly increase my tax burden by about $4,000 to $5,000, forcing me to make those difficult decisions about increasing pricing and plans for future growth. That estimate doesn't even account for the increased costs that businesses like mine would face from services such as my accountant, bookkeeper, and any other marketing services outsourced. This legislation would also create a significant administrative burdens for small businesses to track, collect, and remit this new tax. This is particularly daunting for many non-retail small businesses who don't have the infrastructure in place to collect taxes as part of our business process. This means additional accounting and bookkeeping costs and time spent on compliance rather than growing our businesses and supporting the Maryland economy. While today's proposal narrowly targets specific services at a seemingly innocuous 2.5%, it creates a troubling precedent, opening up a new category for economic activity to taxation, and there's no reason to believe that it'll stop here. On behalf of myself and the members of the Pasadena Business Association, I urge you to reject SB 1045. In the current economic environment, we need policies that support small businesses, that make up the backbone of Maryland's economy and represent the greatest opportunity for economic growth within our state and keep us competitive within our region.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Lori Graff. I'm the CEO of the Maryland Building Industry Association. And while we do appreciate the fact that there was certainly an attempt in this year's legislation to exempt housing and to not have as big of an impact on housing, there is still some concerns within our industry. First of all, our members obviously are business owners, so there is just the general business expenses, but there is some direct costs that will make housing more expensive in Maryland at a time when we can ill afford to do so. I did want to note the National Association of Home Builders has some data, and for every $1,000 you increase the price of a house, you are pricing 1,524 Marylanders out of that house. So that is concerning anytime you increase the price of housing. I did do a case study. Obviously, we had very short time on this. We did look at a few projects to see what this would do. There are things in this bill such as landscape planning, environmental consulting, traffic consultants, marketing, graphic arts, photography, as well as some other things that are kind of soft costs that would affect the price of housing. The projects we looked at, it would increase the price from anywhere from $1,500 to $2,500 for that price of that house. Obviously, it may sound like a small amount, but when you look at the overall picture, it is pricing Marylanders out of that housing. On the multifamily side, we looked at it as well, and we had similar numbers to MMHA, which was about $20 to $30 per unit per month. As you are probably well aware, Maryland has 53% of our renters are cost burden, so any increase is a problem. I also want to note that there is one of the codes was commercial and industrial machinery and equipment repairs and maintenance, which is your HVACs. Multifamily is a commercial building, so this would affect multifamily, and many of these buildings are going to have to do BEPS, which was mentioned earlier, the Building Energy Performance Standards, which will increase the cost of having to make all those repairs. So for those reasons, we'd ask you to look at this bill a little bit closer. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, Mr. President, members of the committee, it's an honor to appear before you today. I'm here, unfortunately, to very respectfully oppose Senate Bill 1045. In my view and in McCormick's view, it's the wrong tax at the wrong time, and it's guaranteed to do three things that we as a state don't want to do right now. We want to encourage economic growth. We believe this will stifle economic growth in the state. We want to encourage new companies to form here or move here. We believe this will discourage them from doing that. Third, we want companies like us to be encouraged to continue to invest and grow as headquarters companies here, and I believe this legislation would do just the opposite. Now, you might ask, well, why? The bottom line is, unlike some of the smaller companies that do a lot of outsourcing, we do a lot of big insourcing of services, whether it's advertising, enterprise software, a whole number of things. Other specialists will come in and talk about the work that the 800 to 1,000 McCormick employees do every day at our global headquarters. That work, frankly, can be done anywhere. I've seen our numbers, and they're pretty substantial to hit on this. I've seen at half or a quarter of this major decisions made about locations of certain functions at times. So if a bill like this were to pass and this were to be imposed as of July 1, all our service providers would start charging us 2.5% on top of whatever it is they're charging us, and that would hit our numbers for this year, and certainly for next year, there'd be planning around what can we do, why are we here, what is this doing here? Will our plants move? No, they don't move that easily. But advertising services and marketing services and IT services, they're not factory specific per se. The work that I do on my laptop every day, I can do that anywhere, and I can get that service from anywhere. So I think this is a very ephemeral short-term benefit with a long-term detriment. And the irony is, at a time when the public sector is challenged in ways that none of us ever imagined, this would erode the private sector base, because when those services get exported, when the recipients get exported, sorry, 2 seconds, the jobs go with them. The jobs go to some other place to receive it. And it doesn't have to be in the United States. It could be anywhere on the planet, literally.
Good afternoon, Chair Gazzoni, Mr. President, Mr. Vice Chair. My name is Rebecca Olson. I am a CPA, proud Maryland CPA, and I am the CEO of the Maryland Association of CPAs. I'm here on behalf of my 9,000 members, some of which you have already heard from, but many more that would have liked to be here today, but of course this is their busiest time of the year. 5 years ago, my member services were deemed essential to keeping Maryland afloat during the COVID-19 pandemic. Now this bill will seek to tax those very same services, the ones that businesses rely on to comply with the laws that are created here. This bill is a tax on compliance itself. If a small business hires a CPA to ensure that they're meeting their tax obligation, they would be taxed on that service. If a business requires an audit to get funding, they would be taxed on that service. This bill disproportionately hits small businesses. While large corporations like McCormick here have some internal teams, small businesses must rely on external CPAs. This will increase their costs and make Maryland businesses less competitive than their neighbors across the state, or across the borders. We've been down this road before. In 2007, Maryland tried to tax computer services, only to repeal it a few months later due to the economic harm and administrative burden that it caused. Why should we repeat that mistake again? This bill is bad policy, and it's bad for Maryland's economy. It drives businesses to neighboring states, it creates costs for small businesses, and it creates administrative burden. On behalf of the CPA profession in Maryland, I respectfully urge an unfavorable report on SB 1045. Let's not leave the Maryland business community behind. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. President.
First and foremost, I just want to thank each of you and those who are in the audience as well who are here. And I just want to reiterate again what the sponsor of the bill mentioned was that I don't think there's any one of us that want to be here having this conversation. It is the last place and the last policy that we hope to pursue in this legislative session. But I say this in the context of the news that we just got today that CMMI is now ending total cost of care for healthcare systems for 8 other states and is projecting to what that could mean for Maryland. And Maryland gets about $4 billion a year in our waiver system, unlike any other state that upholds our entire hospital system across the state of Maryland. It's in jeopardy. If the waiver were to go away, $4 billion would be taken out of the healthcare system, and the question is, how do we backfill it? That is the unknown. The known is the $300 million just last week that was written down because of cuts. So I just want to reiterate that none of us want to be in this position, but we do have a responsibility for figuring it out, to provide public services, particularly for those who need it most. And this is one of many options that are being considered. And Paul, one of the other options that is on the table is combined reporting is something that's out there. And, as we look, it's something, a policy that this committee has blocked over and over and over again, because we want to make sure that we have been in a place where we can be competitive, regionally competitive, nationally competitive. But as we look at options and have to balance our budget, unlike the federal government that can just continue to print money, we have to figure out what will do the least harm. As you look at, for McCormick in particular, this policy versus I know it's not just those two, but in a relative, this is the joys of the moment of what is the least harm.
That's a very difficult. Thank you, Mr. President, for the opportunity to address you, and thank you for the candor. That's something we really want to have to consider and think about. These are both very significant hits to the company. They hit in different ways. The sales tax would be an immediate hit that impacts operating profit, just from an accounting perspective, whereas income tax is in a lower spot, and there's different, because of the accounting with deferred taxes, the initial hit with combined reporting comes in stronger, harder. But they're both long-term hits. So it's almost, I don't want to use the metaphor that I'm about to, but it's like pick the child you least like. You know what I mean? I love both of my children. So it's sort of the inverse of that. So I don't want to make that choice publicly. It's very difficult to do, Mr. President. But I understand your situation. I understand the difficult situation. And I know in the short term with the budget situation, it is what it is. I do remember back in 2007 and 8 when we were at a similar circumstance, we did, under more considered circumstances, have a Business Tax Reform Commission. I had the pleasure of serving with Senator King on that for 2 years, and we looked at everything and came up with recommendations. We may be on a shorter fuse right now fiscally in this state because of circumstances largely beyond all of our control, understood. But nevertheless, when we're making these fundamental tax policy decisions like this that have long-term ramifications, my recommendation is let's take a pause and think long and hard about it. I know that doesn't solve the question that was asked before by the vice chair, but let's be really careful about the incentives that we create and what we do here. So it's a very careful non-answer, but it's a thoughtful non-answer, because I really want us to work it through carefully. Beyond that, and also I don't want to point in a direction in another part of the economy and what we could do. It's just not appropriate for someone in my position.
Mr. President, if I may, too, sort of like interject from that, big picture to, again, small business. I know that, there's the budget deficit. I know that all options are on the table to look for everything. But let me just remind, one thing that small business is looking at, just like larger businesses are looking at, are all the implementations that we have to do the next few years for BEPS. That's a serious capital outlay that we all have to do. So it's again, one of those things you're asking. But every now and then, again, eventually the well goes dry. There's no more to give. So I would just like everyone here to take that into consideration too. There's long-term planning that he spoke to down the road that we all have to, and those are capital outlays that we're not going to make back.
Thank you all. I'm going to have to step out of the room for a minute, but something that's been said a couple times about neighboring states, and I think that's. We look at all of that, always. And there is a mishmash out there, and it's complicated, and it's not clear. But just for an example, because I know there was one of the previous panels, I think, said, none of our neighboring states do any of this. Well, that's just not true. Pennsylvania does business support services at 6%. Pennsylvania does employment services at 6%. I know there's a couple on here where Pennsylvania does some things. Pennsylvania advertising and public relations at 6%. But it's a mishmash. There's no question about it. But we're thinking about everything we can possibly think about to try to get to a fair place. And it's not easy, not at all. At the end of the day, quite frankly, when we're talking about big numbers, there's really only two things that we can look at. It's sales and use tax and income. That's it. Those are the only two that generate the big numbers that get to $1 billion or more. And so that's where we ultimately have to go when we get into these situations. It's just complicated. And as the president said, we certainly don't want to be here doing this. It's a complicated world right now, and we're trying to make sense of all that. And he pointed out how complicated it has been just in the last couple of days, quite frankly. So I'm going to step out for a minute, but I'll be back in a few, and the Vice Chair is going to take over. But I thought it was important for folks to know that there is a seriousness that we take in everything we do, I can assure you, and the time that we put into all of this. And as Senator Benson said, the waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning and thinking, how can we figure this out? It exists. We know that's in your businesses too. Quite frankly, I like to think that we are you. I mean, some of us have businesses. And I'm thinking about those things too with regard to my business and how all these would apply to the things that I do. That's the beauty of democracy. We are you. And we're trying to figure it out the best we possibly can. So anyhow, I apologize for leaving for a minute, but thank you all for coming.
Mr. Vice Chair, I have a question. Ms. Schmidt, how many people do you employ, and how is your business set up?
So I started my business in 2020. I lost my job at the beginning of the pandemic. I started as a freelancer. I actually have subcontractors who support me and my clients. Some of them are Maryland-based, so they too would have to tax me. They would have to increase their rates. So it kind of has a trickle-down effect. You know, I would love to hire a full-time employee. I'm not at that revenue level yet.
Are you at 1099?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
That's helpful. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The governor's overall budget originally had a ratio of 2 to 1, meaning 2/3 cuts, 1/3 revenue generation. And while we're having lots of debate about how that translates, I'm interested in asking you, whoever wants to answer, who has been in business for a while, do you think that's a correct ratio? For example, having been on the private sector side myself for about 30 years, there are good years, there are bad years. When you have bad years, you make tough decisions. So I'm curious, do you think it should be completely cuts? Do you think that ratio is correct? What has been your experience to anyone who's been in business long enough to personally experience both the ups and downs?
I will say from, again, small business perspective, the hotel was open, the one that I'm with was open in 1988. I've been there since 2001. So I've seen a lot of recessions, lots of ups and downs, lots of market conditions, obviously COVID. And I will say that discounting COVID, but since COVID, that the market, the challenges that we have, not only in our industry, but just in other folks in similar industries, small business in general, with supply chain, increased in insurance, increased in labor costs. I've seen more in the last, 4 or 5 years, challenges as it comes to things that are in the middle, the expenses, with very little options available to us as small businesses to drive the top line. So it's becoming more and more challenging to source everything, to make all of those decisions, to still stay somewhat profitable, and I look at my employees like family, okay? I have 40 to 50 employees depending upon the time of the year. And so I can honestly say that even through all the other recessions that I've been through and all the other conditions, and I have friends, and that's one good thing about our region, we're, the last in, first out of recessions typically. But I will say in the last 4 to 5 years, it's become considerably more challenging because of all the factors that are seeming to hit us all at one time versus just one and two things. There's so many different things. Just like something you guys can't control, the increased energy expense with delivery that we have happen in July. We can't control it, and that's something that's going to go up exponentially year over year over year that you can't even really predict or project. You just know it's coming. I know for us is, again, this one little small mid-sized hotel that's going to cost me between 20 and 25 grand just the second half of this year alone. That's right off the bottom line. And I can't control that because we consume what we consume. So I will say that, yes, it's very hard to run a business. It's very hard to keep those margins where you need to. And sometimes you have to make very tough decisions. And when we choose not to reinvest in the business, and we put all, hotels are a lot like hospitals. We're living, breathing things. We have occupancy. We have guests. We have a legit depreciation. If we don't reinvest in our asset, it deteriorates. But we have to make tough decisions like that. If we hire more folks, if we cut on other things like, God forbid, sales and advertising, which I hate to do, but sometimes that's the first thing to come out of budgets, and also that capital reinvestment. And when we don't do the capital reinvestment back into the asset, when we do those projects, we employ local folks, local vendors, contractors, subcontractors to do all of that work. So there definitely is that trickle long-term effect, that vacuum on the economy overall. But again, I could say I've been doing this here in this state for the last 24 years, and this is the toughest business environment that I've seen.
I'm not sure I've heard the answer to
Sure.
the question.
Oh, okay. Well, okay.
So are you saying you do both, a combination of both?
Oh, would I do a combination of both? I tell you, it's extremely, have I done a combination of both? Well, I'm in a little bit different seat. I can't very well increase my revenues. I always have to decrease my spending because it's very hard in tough times to increase the top line. You always have to increase the middle. By top line, I mean income. I always have to decrease expenses. And those are tough choices, just like you guys have tough choices. So thank you.
So evidently it was like I never left. Although it's an interesting moment. Just I'm going to share with you what I just did because it's interesting in the context of all this. The part that I didn't mention earlier was I was sort of describing a little bit of what we try to do to be thorough is additionally cutting. And so the governor has a program of he made $2 billion worth of cuts. Well, we have set a goal of doing at least another, and I'll just say those may have been a little easier because they were the first round of cuts. We put in the commitment to do another $500 million, which is what we're working on right now to help make this work. And I just cut $25 million as I walked out the room. So, and I don't mean to be, there's nothing to be light about of any of it because I know it's all complicated and tough. But that, what I just did was real services too, and real, it's going to affect people too. So it's a complicated mess. And I'm grateful that you're here to give your impressions and thoughts about what this impact would be. Our job, of course, is to look at it all. And we're going to do our very best to do that. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Grayson Wiggins.
Chair.
Yeah.
I'm Giovanni Hawkins. I
Oh, yeah.
didn't have a
Yep.
seat.
Come on in.
Thank you.
Come on in. Yep. Laura Antoinette, John Skinner, Michael Halloran, Lisa May, Gregory Morgan. Forgive me. Anna Tasios. Oh, he's a virtual. Sorry, apologize. I'll make that mistake later. Steve Navarro, Lauren Pearl, Joseph Fitzpatrick, Lori Naito, James Trela. Okay, whoever wants to start.
I'll go ahead and take a first swing at it, Mr. Chairman. For the record, my name is Mike O'Halloran. I'm here today representing NFIB in Maryland. look, it should come as no surprise that this is going to have an outsized impact on small businesses in particular. As you heard in the last panel, that's the reason being is because small businesses frankly rely on other businesses to do some of the services that are outlined and now subject to this tax in Senate Bill 1045, talking about things like accounting, talking about web design, photography. Another issue, actually, I had a member call me yesterday talking about the impact that this is going to have on some of her multi-year contracts. She's being told by her attorney, it's an environmental consulting firm, and they've done big projects like BWI and some redevelopment in downtown Columbia. Her attorney is telling her that if this bill were to pass, she is on the hook for $50,000. And so can she go back and hopefully renegotiate her contract with her clients? It's certainly a possibility, but at the end of the day, she's still on the hook for that $50,000. There's also the issue of layering, which I'm sure you may have heard from a different panelist. But for the small business that is paying for these services, it's not just 2.5% here. It's 2.5% there. It's 2.5% over here. So at the end of the day, it could well be 7.5, 10, 12.5, even 15 percentage points to their bottom line. But the last thing I'll leave you with is, look. Certainly small businesses depend on our medium and larger sized brothers and sisters. But, one thing that you'll hear from large businesses, and I don't mean this disparagingly at all, but they certainly have fungible assets and they also have a much better resources to move and relocate. I'm here to tell you that small businesses aren't so lucky. So I just want to leave you with that, when we talk about the outsized impact of such a professional services tax, it's the small businesses that are really going to take it on the chin. And certainly we know that that's not the intent, but it is what it is. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Pass it around. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Grayson Wiggins here on behalf of the Maryland Chamber of Commerce. I want to say that we do understand that this is a difficult time and these are difficult decisions. I think one of the primary reasons that you're hearing from a lot of businesses today is that Maryland is the third most expensive state to do business in currently. Our tax climate is ranked 46th. Our job growth rate is consistently in the 40s, or ranked in the 40s. And since 2019, Maryland has ranked 44th in new business applications. And there is a large body of research that shows that taxes like this dampen job growth, they limit economic opportunity, and that's not from partisan organizations. That's from independent third-party research organizations, state treasury departments in other states. It's from academic institutions, and it raises the question. And I know that other states do tax services. I understand that. Pennsylvania, I know, has a different list, but some, I think, are included in this bill. But Pennsylvania is cutting their corporate income tax rate to 4.99%. And Maryland, ours is still going to be at 8.25. And my understanding, based on a tax foundation report that was released on March 12th, is that pretty much everything listed in here is exempted in almost every other state. And so it raises questions like federal contractors and federal workers are being impacted, but this bill is taxing the same industries that they are going to be seeking jobs in. And the data tells us that it will limit job growth in those industries. And so these are very difficult times, but these are very difficult questions, and they are backed by data and research, and I believe that's why so many businesses are here today. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for having me. My name is Joseph Fitzpatrick. I go by the name Bo. I am the Chief Operating Officer of a public accounting firm in Rockville, Maryland. It's 100 people. We do about $24 million in sales. About 70% of that comes from tax work. I've lived in Maryland since 1969. I love Maryland. I love growing up here. I love going to school here. I love working here, and I think I might enjoy retiring here at some point. I really appreciate what you all do, And Mr. Vice Chair, I really appreciate your professionalism up there today. I'm going to remember that. And, everything's already been said. I've got nothing more to add other than the last time the federal government was balanced, I think it was when President Clinton did it. And most of that came through growth. Through growth, it wasn't cutting, it was growing. And that's what we need to do in Maryland. We need, a handful more of Under Armours and McCormick's and even all the small businesses. I also am a small business owner with doing other things. That's the key to me is the growth side, and that would be my idea is to figure out what else we can do to generate growth. The NIH and that whole system that permeates through Montgomery County and up through 270 is amazing, and the technology that's also in different parts of the state is really incredible. And I think Maryland is a great state. I love it. We have everything to offer, and I think we can use that to attract more businesses. So thank you all very much, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here. And I would vote unfavorably, and if I could carve out tax returns from this, that would be my preference. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I'm Lauren Pearl, Vice President of Tax at Under Armour. Thank you for the setup. As a large Maryland headquartered company, we are expressing opposition to Senate Bill 1054. This would tax the majority of services that Under Armour purchases. This bill would disproportionately tax Maryland headquartered companies versus other companies doing business in the state but located elsewhere. We support tax policies that tax all companies doing business in the state evenly. We spend heavily in marketing and information technology to stay competitive in our industry. This tax with a July 1st effective date would add immediate material costs to our current fiscal year, creating difficult choices, needing to cut planned investments in Maryland and possibly cutting planned hiring. We believe that this will create a competitive disadvantage in the region. While there are some services taxed in Virginia, Pennsylvania, and Delaware, none of them include these material business services. We want other businesses to grow in Maryland. We want to grow in Maryland. Many headquartered companies have other U.S. locations outside of Maryland. This bill will encourage companies to grow locations outside of Maryland instead of investing employees and resources in Maryland. We have options. We want to be here. Further, this will limit Maryland's ability to attract additional businesses. Maryland is also proposing to eliminate the majority of statutory economic incentives, including enterprise zones and One Maryland tax credits. Maryland will be further challenged to attract companies if this bill passes, as Maryland will have no incentives to offer to offset this tax increase, which other states have numerous. In conclusion, we hope that you will give an unfavorable report and look for taxes that evenly tax businesses who are located in and outside of Maryland. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the committee. Lisa May with Maryland Realtors. I believe I'm the third person at this point to thank the sponsor for efforts to keep housing supply out of this bill. It has not gone unnoticed, but that doesn't mean that our industry is not still impacted by this bill. Our 28,000 members are not employees of their real estate brokerages. They are independent contractors. So they are one-person LLCs, they are one-person corporate entities, and this will impact them as sole proprietors, whether it's through the services that they use or those that they arrange on behalf of their clients who are selling homes in Maryland each year. But I think more broadly concerning to us as an industry is that Maryland is growing more and more unaffordable each and every year. Voters have named taxes, they've named inflation, and yes, housing costs as some of the reasons why they have either already left the state or they are considering doing so in the future. And because of that, our economy is at a standstill. So we've talked about difficult choices. I don't envy you in the closing weeks of this General Assembly session at all for the choices that you're going to have to make. But when you make them, we ask that you consider whether they will make Maryland more affordable for our residents, for our workforce, and whether those choices will get Maryland's economy moving forward in a positive manner. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. Mr. Chair, you brought up that Pennsylvania does tax some of these services. I will point out that our neighboring states do not tax tax and accounting services. And I'm sorry, I forgot my introduction. I'm Giovanni Hawkins, the Executive Director of the Maryland Society of Accounting and Tax Professionals. We strongly oppose Bill 1045 for many critical reasons. Small businesses rely on accounting services for tax compliance. The extra cost would force professionals to either absorb these expenses or pass them on to their clients. Many businesses would seek more affordable options across state lines, harming Maryland's tax professionals while providing no more benefit to the state revenue. This bill raises significant legal concerns about state taxation of federal tax return preparation. Federal law mandates compliance with federal taxes, and imposing a state sales tax on these services may conflict with the supremacy clause and principles of federal preemption. The administrative burden of separating out those taxable from non-taxable services create an additional compliance headache for our tax professionals and accountants. And finally, this legislation creates an unequal tax environment. While accounting services under NICS Code 5412 are targeted, legal services under Code 5411 are exempt. This would tax approximately 190,000 accounting businesses while exempting 360,000 legal service businesses, an unreasonable disparity that disadvantages accounting professionals who often provide similar tax-related services. This tax would likely reduce state income rather than generate revenue. It would decrease compliance with existing tax laws and drive business to neighboring states, all while burdening Maryland's accounting professionals. We urge an unfavorable report on Senate Bill 1045. Thank you.
Mike, you know, sitting here and listening to this, and earlier Senator Jackson talked about, you know, the number of services have been singled out, and I've looked at it here with like 2 pages, and then I've pulled up the NAICS code. I've got an Excel sheet here that's 2-digit, 3-digit, 4-digit, 5 and 6-digit NAICS code, and it's thousands of lines each. So obviously there's thousands of services. Well, that's also, I guess, products also. And I look at how we do it with sales tax for products in the state. And the fact that we're singling out individual services, and I'm trying, you know, we talk about fairness and what's fair. How does NFIB feel that if we lowered the rate 2.5 down, maybe 0.5% or 0.25%, and did all services, just across the board, and said, you know what, if we're going to do it, let's just do every service that's considered a service. That way, nobody's being singled out. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, certainly I'd refer back to my original comments about, you know, and incorporate the comments from every other panelist up here. But, you know, it still puts us at a competitive disadvantage. But further to the point, you know, the collection and the remission of this tax, you know, it's a complicated process. I think you're hearing that from a lot of folks, not least of which the accountants. So if you were to, let's say, you know, I understand the argument of just, well, let's spread it a little thinner, so hopefully we can lower the pain threshold.
Figure out what the dollar, get the same dollar amount in the end.
Right. I think
whatever the dollar amount is.
I think you're frankly, I think you're spreading the complications to a larger group of people, because I'd caution, you know, whether it's DLS or this body, you know, I caution about the immediate realization of any revenue, because frankly, you know, NFIB members, other accountants, any other industry, you know, that if you expand the list, they're going to be on one heck of a learning curve for something to be realized for the next fiscal year. So I just caution about that. And you know, I'd further say, you know, our good friend, now the chair of the Energy Committee, the Senate Energy Committee, back in 2020, he had a bill that NFIB strongly supported. Believe it or not, we do support bills, but we supported this bill. And what it did is it set up a blue ribbon commission to really study this state's tax climate. It's, you know, kind of detangle the web of taxes that we level on, you know, different goods, you know, even technically, I think there are a handful of services that we levy a service tax on, but take a more holistic approach. I also admit that probably doesn't help us in the current predicament that we find ourselves. But you know, if we think that we're going to get, whether it's $1 billion, $1.3 billion, I caution against that. So it's a very long-winded way, as is my my nature, to say I just don't think you'll get there, no matter how far you spread it and how low you bring it. I think it still goes to hurting, you know, Maryland's competitiveness.
My question is more on the fairness of the businesses. If this body decides to do it, what's the fairest way for all businesses in Maryland to face this? Is it, you know, cherry picking these services or just spreading it across all? So.
I think that's, I think somebody in the panel before me kind of alluded to a Sophie's choice. I mean, you know, I don't have a good answer for you.
Right.
Any other questions for this panel? Well, thank you all very much. Did I get Greg Morgan, Steve Navarro, Lori Nito, James Trela, Savdra Scott, Stefan Propescu, Matthew Almond, Chris Parts, Kelly Locklear, Louis Campion, Natasha Nazareth, Matthew Kraft, Melissa Wade. Okay, whoever would like to start.
I'll start. Hi, I'm Lori Nieto. I'm a tax director for Northrop Grumman Corporation in the aerospace and defense sector. Northrop Grumman has more than 14,000 employees in the state of Maryland, with locations across the state and hundreds of Maryland-based suppliers. We've enjoyed a decades-long partnership with the state, which has allowed us to grow. While we understand the budget shortfall and need for revenue, we're opposed to this proposal for several reasons. Uncertainty in tax policy, compliance challenges, the time frame, and most importantly, competitiveness. Northrop Grumman competes against companies in other states for programs, with cost being a factor. And given our significant footprint in this state, this increase could impact our overall competitiveness. For example, like when we compete with a company who could receive the same service in another state, we would pay 2.5% more for that service that we received in Maryland than our competitor would pay in another state. And so as a company that operates in many states, we have options on where we can choose to grow. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Stefan Popescu. My companies are all based in Baltimore City. I'm lucky enough to be in multiple different industries: hospitality, restaurants, real estate, and manufacturing. This bill will make it much more expensive to do business in Maryland, as you've heard multiple times from different panels. and more importantly, unaffordable to the actual individuals that are living here. I think we're all smart enough in this room to realize these cost increases snowball down to the end user, which is the consumer. Keep this short, not to repeat what everyone else said on the panel multiple times. I did want to bring up the point of the hotelier who was here talking about the 2.5% and not being able to change his top line. If we're being taxed on marketing and different expenditures that try to help us grow, that is the only way for that industry specifically, but many other industries can grow. And you're taking our legs from underneath us by trying to tax those dollars that would help us grow in Maryland. And for that reason, would like to be unfavorable to the bill. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Matt Allman. I'm the CEO of a company called Home Centris Healthcare, which is the largest provider of home care services to Medicaid recipients in Maryland. We employ about 1,000 folks in Maryland. I'm also on the board of the Maryland Home Care Association, so I'm speaking on behalf of companies like ours around the state as well, and we're here to oppose this bill. As has been discussed, this bill would tax a lot of the services that we buy, accounting, tax preparation, IT, software, a lot of the things that we buy. And as what I'd like to hopefully ask for your consideration in my testimony, because a lot of the things I don't want to repeat, but you've heard a lot of folks say that these taxes will be passed down to their customers, whether it's the ultimate consumer or just the next person in the supply chain. As a Medicaid provider, I'd like to remind you that we can't pass our costs along unless you'd like to vote us a rate increase, which I would certainly have a conversation with you. But our rates are under pressure, and I believe the governor's budget and as well as some other proposals are looking to cut rates. So we do not get to pass these taxes along. I did notice that the sponsor mentioned that some of the not-for-profits were exempted from this bill, but we're not. So we have to eat these costs. And because 90% of my expenses are payroll related, my choices are to cut office staff or to reduce the wages of my caregivers or have the agency eat it and really be at risk. So I'm out of time, but I would respectfully request that some folks can't pass it along, and we have to eat it. So we would respectfully oppose this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, Louis Campion with Maryland Motor Truck Association, and we are here unfavorable. The reality is that many of these business services, we will pay all of them, whether that be IT services, accounting, printing, payroll, any of those things. So I'm going to focus only on the specific inclusion of heavy truck and bus repair as a single line item in this bill. It feels a little coercive to our membership because under both federal and state law, you have to go through mandatory preventive maintenance, inspection, repair procedures that can be 4 to 5 times per year per truck. And that's to ensure that our vehicles are still safe on your roadways. So, in addition to that, we are regularly inspected at the scale houses, and work orders are then issued, citations are issued. In many cases, you might get an out of service order that has to be repaired. Now we'll be subject to that. So the greatest harm by inclusion of that one single line item for trucking companies are the small local trucking companies, because they don't have maintenance shops or technicians that they employ. They outsource all of that to dealerships or independent repair stations, right? So if I'm a larger company, I'm just doing that in-house, and so I'm not subjecting myself to a tax on a service that I perform. But the small companies have no choice. We are delivering the essential products Marylanders need. We know that some parts of these we're going to obviously be subject to, many of those services. But at the end of the day, our citizens literally have nothing without trucking. And so, we would just ask you for an unfavorable on the bill, and thank you.
Hi, I'm Melissa Wade. I was born and raised in Maryland, and I opened up my hardware store here in Annapolis almost 25 years ago. And Senator Young, that question you asked a little while ago at the end, if I can, I'd love an opportunity to answer that for you. Just a note. But I am a member of the Ace Hardware Co-op. It is a co-op, not a franchise, a big difference. What that means is I am really a small, independent business owner. I am the mom and pop, the brick and mortar that people refer to and talk about. I'm probably the closest to a small business here out of everybody that I've sat on the panel with in this building and the other one. So it just to really, take you to the heart of small business. I'm afraid for my future here. As time goes by, Maryland just continues to pass all these costly anti-business policies and mandates that increase my taxes. And when it increases taxes, I have to look for cuts elsewhere. Some of the most recent increases, and most of it has to do with, sick leave, minimum wage increases, insurance increase, our energy increase, supply chain problems. I mean, I can go on and on about it, of all the upcoming costs that, I'm hearing about, upcoming taxes that will have an effect on me as well. And then when this come across, it's like, my gosh, how much more do you want to put on us? It's just a lot, and it is very terrifying looking forward at my future here in Maryland. It's not like I can pick up my store and move it. I am a brick and mortar. I have employees that have been with me for nearly 20 years that, I think about them and where they would be if I were to fail or not be here. Oops, I'm out of time. But thank you, and I strongly oppose. And again, I'll answer that question. No, you go ahead and I can answer after.
Okay. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I'm Chris Parts with AIA Maryland, an architect representing 2,000 architects across the state, here in opposition to Senate Bill 1045. Nearly 95% of our members are firms of less than 50 people, probably a majority, 10 people or less. And between the many consultants that we need to contract with to complete projects, and most of our members needing contract services for managing and marketing, this is a significant burden. I want to share 3 simple points. First is that the Maryland climate of public procurement does little to advance opportunities for architects. We have businesses that pay taxes here, architect members, residents that pay taxes here, and yet if you take a look at the procurement project awards, they're increasingly going to firms out of state. Yet protective measures in many of those adjacent jurisdictions preclude us from winning work elsewhere. Secondly, Maryland is a small state, so many of us need to pursue work out of state. This makes us less cost competitive as we try to win regional work. While we're not directly taxed as a part of this bill, it puts us in a position of adding the tax for the consultants we need to bring on and to run our businesses. And we have to choose either to absorb those or to try to pass those on to the owner. And in this climate, it's virtually impossible. And finally, this forces our members to invest less time in making better and more efficient places to live, play, and work, and then time spent on tax and compliance. So in our eyes, this does less to build business and add revenue to Maryland, but it adds another burden on a profession that's recognizing a diminished investment by our state for the services that we provide. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. And thank you, everyone, for being here today. Listen, I wanted to follow up on the trucking aspect, and I appreciate you bringing that up because when I originally had asked a question at the very beginning, I was looking for examples, and I thought it was a very good example that you gave. And understanding a lot of the small trucking industry and businesses we have throughout the state. I know where I live, we have what I think is one of the larger ones, and I would think that based on what you had said, I think I find it very reasonable that you're going to see these entities, I guess, leave, not maybe physically leave, but to do that maintenance work you're talking about, particularly in our part of the area where for literally 5 or 10 miles we can go either direction to another place. Would you suspect that those entities will do that they will take their maintenance business to a neighboring state that wouldn't have this type of tax, because as we're aware, these are very expensive repairs too, typically. That we're not talking about just getting your oil changed. These are typically thousands and thousands of dollars of repairs. When you add a tax to it, it becomes a significant number as well. Multiply that by the fleet, things of that nature. So I guess, do you suspect that we will see that? We'll see the trucking industry in Maryland, and especially these outlying areas, taking their repair business to other states?
Well, and I think, thank you, Senator. I think that certainly in your area of the state, right, where on I-81, you're talking about just a few miles in either direction. I think that's a very viable option for companies. Particularly, again, the small companies are the ones that are most harmed. And I have a member who's a very small company who's going to be speaking later. But, you know, the company you're obviously thinking of in your district, they have their own maintenance shop, right? And so they have the ability to do that work in-house. But at the port where, you know, 80% of the drivers at the port are independent contract owner-operators, for example, you know, those guys, they have to do that by outsourcing that work to somebody else, right? And so we certainly hurt ourselves, I think, competitively, because unlike a lot of other businesses, we're mobile, right? That's what we are. And so the ease to go to another location, assuming cost competitiveness, is very viable for trucking.
No, I appreciate it, because I try to then look at that in the whole scope of how we're trying to, the intent of all this is try to overall improve our economy. I think when we see things like that, I don't know if that necessarily actually achieves that goal. So thank you for the information.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to also direct my question to Mr. Champion. Did I understand you correctly? You said that the trucking industry is unique in that you're the only industry that would be charged a separate charge for heavy truck and bus repair?
So thank you, Senator. Right. So yes, my point was that we are the buyers of heavy truck and bus repair, right? So unlike all of the other business services that are in here, which we are absolutely subject to and utilize as well, accounting, IT, all of those other services, you know, this is kind of a unique service that nobody else is going to get heavy truck and bus repair unless you're in our industry. Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Afternoon. Thank you all for coming. Thank you for your presentation. But I just want to ask a question. I'm not so sure any of you in this room can answer it. But if you look around in this room, and we're talking about not supporting taxes, and we hear you, we do. And we're working so hard, we really are, trying to find a way so that you will not have to endure a lot of cuts and all kinds of things that prevail with your business, because we want you here. But the question I want you to ask yourself, if you look around in this room and you have seen the people who come up here to testify, there's an absence of diversity. At some point, you may want to think about that. And I'm just wondering why we don't have the kind of diversity in this room that would express the same thoughts that you all have expressed to us this afternoon. That's just a question that I'm thinking about as I sit here.
Senator, can I just say something? Because I have a member here who's coming up behind me, who's like a 3-truck company, and she's sitting right over there, and I think you'll see she's running a very small business and a very diverse business, so thank you.
That is so refreshing to hear. That is very refreshing.
Thank you.
Okay.
I'm a woman. Just in case. But no, a woman.
Okay.
Identify as a woman.
Thank you.
Senator?
I've received my answer, thank you.
Oh, you did? Okay, all right.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Maybe only one here.
Good afternoon, honorable members of the committee. For the record, Kaylee Locklear here on behalf of the Maryland Retailers Alliance. Maryland's retail and hospitality sector is not only the state's largest private sector employer, but it's also one of your most significant economic drivers, not to mention your second largest source of revenue in this state. From national brands to small businesses on your main streets, we are truly the backbone of Maryland's economy. Many Maryland businesses in our industry operate on razor-thin margins, and you've heard me talk about the grocery industry, which is the lowest at 1% to 3%. A new tax is not just another expense, it's an existential threat that could force businesses to scale back, relocate, or shut down entirely. Ultimately, these increased costs won't just hurt businesses, they will hurt Maryland families. And businesses will pass costs on to them. Whether it's higher essential costs like grocery bills or fewer job opportunities, this tax will hit consumers where it hurts the most, at a time when they can least afford it. We often talk in this committee about the need to grow our economy and attract new businesses. But actions, your actions, speak louder than words. Piling on yet another tax on top of an already very heavy burden sends the opposite message, that Maryland is not an attractive place to do business. And you heard this earlier, this is supported over and over again by every single metric and every poll and every survey and every study that's out there. We continue to urge you to reject this harmful tax and not become a one-of-a-kind state with a one-of-a-kind anti-business tax completely focused on B2B services. It's just not happening in a vacuum. From increased insurance costs, power costs, sick leave, minimum wage, family, and then the plethora of things that are on the table, because it doesn't just stop here. Because of the blueprint, the costs that we're talking about here are not resolved just by this increase. So I'll stop there. We urge an unfavorable report. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Natasha Nazareth. I'm here to testify in opposition on behalf of the Maryland State Bar Association. Lawyers are not named in this bill, but we fear an impact on our profession and on the clients that we serve, many of whom are small businesses and individuals who are facing bankruptcy, business formation, family law, employment issues, personal injury, tax preparation, financial planning, immigration, estate planning, and every other life occurrence that the people of Maryland face. I want to talk to you about two things specifically. I am a business lawyer. I represent clients around the state, most of whom are small businesses, and 86% are purpose-driven businesses and underserved entrepreneurs. I want to give you the example of how a client gets their fair day in court when their lawyer is able to take expert witness testimony. That testimony will be taxed by the expert in preparing their testimony and sitting for a deposition, by the court reporter who records the deposition, by the contracted paralegal who prepares the exhibits and notes for the lawyer to use at trial, and so on and so forth. Those costs are not costs that the law firms, particularly small firms who are the majority of our members, can absorb. They will be passed along to businesses and individual clients. And they will restrict the value of affordable access to the courts, that each person and business can have a fair day in court. I also want to provide you with information about the impact on pro bono representation and legal services providers. As small firms struggle with the impact of this tax, they will be expected to decrease the number of pro bono hours that they can provide, and legal services providers will also decrease the funds available to provide their pro bono and low bono services to the people who need them most. Thank you for your consideration. I urge you to oppose this bill.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate everyone that is here today, the feedback that's been given to everyone that has an opportunity to speak before you, because it is a true honor. My name is Matthew Kraft. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for a local education technology company. Our area industry is going to be some of the hardest hit as a part of this bill. The company is Mosaic Learning. I've been with them for almost 6 years now. I'm also a state and property taxpayer, father of 2 Anne Arundel County public schools, and a concerned state resident. I want to thank you for your time again and ask that you oppose this bill, Senate Bill 1045. Before we start, I have a story to tell, just one story. A little over 3 decades ago, my sister and mother, a drugged cat, and I packed up our small home and made our way to Seattle from our family home in North Dakota. My late grandparents and their family were immigrants from an area of the world that is now on fire and has been since the war started 3 years ago. My father didn't speak English until junior high, and so I consider myself, my family, a part of the American dream. As a student, I met with the late former governor of Washington, Mike Lowry, to discuss STEM before they even called it that. Didn't understand tax policy, probably still don't, but understood the impacts of our friends and their parents who worked at Microsoft, which was kicking out over 10,000 millionaires a year at the time. You see, we don't tax something, income and capital, you have more of it. Washington State had no state income tax. Favorable tax policy, along with top-tier local talent, fostered growth in Seattle that enabled me to put myself through college, buy my first car at 18, and first house a year later. I can, again, consider myself a part of the American dream. Fortunately, the 2001 recession hit the region hard. More favorable tax policy moved my first employer from Seattle to Atlanta in late 2001. The relocation hit me hard. More than a decade and a half later, another shift in policy in this state caused my former employer, Social Solutions Global, a very storied Baltimore City and County company, to move to Austin. That hit me hard. Many jobs are gone as a result of this. Does anyone believe that anyone is better off because of it? We talk about jobs and companies moving. I personally experienced it myself twice. It is real. I'm not going to repeat any of the statistics that have been given to you about the state of business in this state and how we rank, but I believe this bill, as many have expressed, will make us less competitive and will force more companies to leave, thus lowering the revenue estimates from this. I encourage you all to look at consumption taxes versus what I consider production tax, and ask again that you reject this bill for a better path for all Marylanders. Thank you.
Thank you. So you said with the, like for instance, a court case, you gave the example of all the different pieces that would be taxed, except for your attorney fees aren't.
That is not in this year's bill, and we're grateful for that.
Well, maybe we should add you guys. I don't think there's a better service that we should add than you guys. So just my thought, Mr. Chair.
I'll second.
That's all I got.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
Stephen Rinaldi, Christine Walters, Jeff Dewberry, oh, not Jeff Dewberry, it's virtual, Andrew Griffin, Robert Wade, Patricia Hagan, no, not that one either, sorry. Sandeep Patel, Bridget Sloan, Nick Manis.
Mr. Chair, Bridget Sloan had to leave. She was one of our hotel members.
Thank you. Lindsay Thompson. Teresa Edelin. Bruce Beriano. Daniel Doherty. Okay.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. For the record, Andrew Griffin here on behalf of the Howard County Chamber of Commerce, respectfully in opposition. The Howard County Chamber of Commerce is 700 plus members, all different industries and businesses of all sizes. I'm not going to belabor the points you've heard about the impact on businesses, the services that they utilize. But what I do want to say is, the business community recognizes the difficult situation, the impact that that the federal workforce is going to have on the state. It's a leg of the stool that supports the state. And I think from our view, we want to make sure we're doing everything to support the other legs of the stool. And to use a recent example from Howard County, one of our member businesses, many of you probably read several weeks ago, a AI development company called Big Bear AI, one of the state's largest AI developers, an anchor business in Columbia, announced that they were going to move their headquarters from Columbia, Maryland to Northern Virginia, taking 500 high-paying and highly skilled jobs with them. And so that announcement was made before the introduction of this bill. And I think the concern is that bills like these force companies to make choices. And in order to support those other legs of the stool, we're just concerned we're forcing companies to make choices that is going to leave us worse off in the long run. And so, we just want to reiterate that. We all need to grow together. We want to be part of the solution. So with that, I would encourage an unfavorable report here, and I appreciate your time and understand it's been a long day.
Good afternoon, Chairman and esteemed members of this committee. My name is Sandeep Patel. I'm a CEO of Crossroads Hospitality, located in Waldorf, Maryland. We were established in 1993, and today we own and operate 8 hotels across Maryland, including our small hotel, Holiday Inn Express in La Plata, Maryland, where I also reside, and we employ 24 team members. As a hotel operator, I'm deeply concerned about this proposed 2.5% tax on businesses. Hotel relies on outsourced services, accounting, payroll services, IT system, property maintenance, and marketing, and many more. So we're estimating between all of 8 hotels, I think our expense based on this 2.5% tax will be over $300,000. And as you know, in the hotel industry, profit margins range from 4 to 6%, even in our good year. So this tax would effectively eliminate a lot of our excess money. And that money is usually, we put back into the hotel to reinvest, buy another property in Maryland, and improve our product to help our customers. So like many other businesses, I've kind of reached breaking points after many of these continuing taxes, from minimum wage to sick pays to all the other extra costs that we are burdening. If this tax passes, we would be forced to make some difficult choices. We'd have to increase prices on our guests, meaning higher room rates for tourists, business travelers, family visitors, and that also supports restaurants, attractions, and real estate businesses. We have been difficult, we've also had difficult meeting some of our bank debt requirements due to some of the increased cost, and this extra cost will definitely cause possibly to default on our loans and snowball our property values, which will in turn lower our property values for the hotel, and that will lower our property taxes. So in closing, this is costing us a lot of money. I'm truly opposed to this bill. Please do not pass this bill to save our jobs and save our hotels.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, committee members. My name is Christine Walters, and I am a sole proprietor, human resources and employment law consultant. In addition to fiscal challenges that many small businesses face, this bill would require me to first figure out which of my clients operate under a NICS code that's listed in the bill, charge those clients the 2.5% tax, then be subject to the same tax as a recipient for business services that I receive, collect those taxes, send them to the state, and I suspect including with some type of itemized accounting or report. I ask you to please not impose that administrative burden on me and on so many of your constituents. Since I started my practice 22 years ago, I have increased my hourly rate 3 times in 22 years. When my expenses increase, my first response is not to pass that on to my clients. That's not even my second response. My first response is to look at my expenses, decrease them where I can, and then implement that plan. Respectfully, I request and expect my state to do the same. I also have some technical questions and concerns about the bill. I'll share just one with you now. Many businesses operate under more than one NICS code. And so if I'm operating under one code that's in the list of 16, but another code or more that are not, how do I determine if I'm covered under the bill? Is it if I operate like more than 50% of my total business operations are under a covered code, I'm covered, or is it just 1%? So those and some others that are in my written testimony are some other questions I would have. And for those reasons and more, I respectfully request an unfavorable report. Thank you.
Good afternoon or evening at this point, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the committee. My name is Lindsay Thompson, here today on behalf of the Maryland Green Industries Council and the Maryland Association of Green Industries. We represent your service providers that do lawn, landscape, nursery, arboriculture, as well as pest control. And we are here in opposition to this legislation. Something that we have heard is that this bill is targeted at large corporations, and many of our members are not large corporations, but would be severely negatively impacted by this legislation. Many of our members are sole proprietors or very small LLCs who have to outsource all of these services, including HR and bookkeeping and IT and software. And while 2.5% on any one of those services may not seem like it is that big of a deal, I can assure you that 2.5% on all of those services would certainly be significant. This would also impact our customers. So having to pass along that or charge that 2.5% when these services are provided to business would not only be an administrative burden, as you have heard about, but would also increase the cost of these essential services. Many of these services are being provided at a time where a business is already experiencing a hardship. So think of a storm comes through and you have a bunch of trees down and you have to hire an arborist to come and remove those trees that's licensed to do so. You have a bed bug outbreak in your hotel and you have to hire a licensed pest control operator to come in and treat for those bed bugs. And so these are really essential services that are required for these businesses to continue to operate, as well as stay in compliance with local regulations, such as the length of your grass or what your landscaping looks like. And we just feel as though now is not the best time to impose these taxes on Maryland's small businesses. Thank you.
Good evening, members of the Senate Budget and Tax Committee. My name is Steve Rinaldi, and I also represent the Maryland State Bar Association. I've had my own law firm in Bethesda since 2005. I'm admitted in DC, Maryland, and Pennsylvania. I am a business attorney. I handle a lot of business agreements, business acquisitions, private offerings of securities, franchising matters, etc. 60% of my clients are women, minorities, and first-generation immigrants. My Maryland clients tend to come from Anne Arundel County, Baltimore City, Baltimore County, Howard County, and Montgomery County. The Maryland State Bar Association strongly opposes SB 1045 for the following reasons, even though lawyers aren't directly mentioned. Many attorneys use bookkeepers, accountants, and tax preparation and payroll services in some capacity. That 2% sales tax will be added to my clients' bills. Most litigators, in appellate litigation, they need to get their briefs bound and printed. Well, now you're looking at a 2.5% charge on printing services. Lawyers tend to be very bad at marketing. Almost all of us outsource our website design and our advertising. Well, that's another 2.5% charges on top of my marketing budget. Does this sales tax extend, it says government relations, does it extend to zoning? Zoning changes. That can get very expensive. You look at MSBA's mission, and it's to promote access to the legal system for everybody. Yet here we are throwing a 2.5% hidden tax basically on it. Let me give you an example. Small businesses, they use payroll services, so they don't have to worry about getting fined by the IRS. Well, if you don't use a payroll service, you might not withhold Social Security, income, and Medicare taxes, and then you're going to be in a lot of trouble. Thank you very, very much, everybody.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the committee. My name is Nick Manis, here in opposition to Senate Bill 1045. I'm here today representing the Maryland Beer Wholesalers Association, who is made up of 22 family-owned and operated businesses throughout the state of Maryland. Our members are responsible for delivering malt beverages across Maryland, ensuring product quality, consumer safety, and regulatory compliance. Beer wholesalers operate in a highly regulated, high-cost industry where profit margins are already tight. We face a 9% state sales tax, which is one of the highest in the nation. We have a federal excise tax. We have a state excise tax. We face rising fuel, utility, and labor costs. And we have to maintain mandatory 24/7, 365 climate control warehouses to ensure product quality and compliance with state and federal regulations. The bill would impact us in numerous ways. The services that are taxed, it looks like they went to a beer wholesaler's operation and picked the ones that hit us the most. Accounting fees, which is kind of confusing to me that you pay a CPA to do your tax returns and you have to pay state and federal taxes. Now, not only are they going to tell you how much tax you owe, but they're going to tax you on top of the tax they just told you what you owe to the state and feds. Marketing and advertising, heavy truck repair, because as you know, to deliver beer, we need heavy trucks. HVAC repair, hydraulic equipment, and repair of materials handling equipment such as forklifts. This tax would not only just affect us, it would drive up costs for retailers, bars, and restaurants. Also, it would put us at a competitive disadvantage when the 9% sales tax went into effect. I don't know if anyone went to the Eastern Shore, Ocean City, but right on the border, Delaware put up billboards that said, "No tax here, buy your beer here." And it definitely had an impact, and we haven't come back from that. The beer wholesalers, we're not going to leave the state, but this is not just going to be a B2B tax. We're going to have that trickle down to our consumers, your constituents. For those reasons, we oppose the bill. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
I was called last, yeah. Teresa Edlin.
Mr. Chairman, she was signed up and called with the last panel, but there were not enough seats for her. She's not.
We can't hear you.
Teresa, these people, this one is Maria's recall.
Okay.
So maybe when you're done.
Why don't you guys dive in and we'll figure this out?
Good afternoon, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the committee. My name is Alan DeLeon. I've been a CPA in Maryland since 1978. I started a firm, DeLeon & Stang, 40 years ago. We have 2 offices in Maryland and 1 in Virginia. I'm past president of the Maryland CPA Association. So I'm here urging a negative report on Senate Bill 1045. So everything I was going to say today has already been said, so I'm not going to repeat it. I'm going to save everybody some time. But I want to make a couple suggestions because I know you guys asked for some input and some ideas. So if I were in your place, I would go back to the Legislative Services Department and I would ask them a couple questions. I would say, why did you not factor in the loss of revenue from businesses that might leave the state, or and also did you factor in the compliance problems with this sales tax and whether or not it would be fully collectible? They're assuming it's fully collectible, and so I would have some doubts about that. And then I would go to them and I would say, how about giving me an estimate of what it would look like if we promoted businesses to come into Maryland so we have a bigger base of people in which to collect tax revenue from? So I leave you with that thought, and thank you very much for your time.
Good afternoon, Mr. Vice Chair and members of the committee. My name is Jeff Wilson II. I'm a certified public accountant and CEO of the W2 Group, an accounting firm based in Upper Marlboro, Maryland, and Prince George's County. I strongly oppose SB 1045 because it would increase costs for businesses at the worst possible time and weaken Maryland's economic competitiveness. Since the start of this year alone, I've already lost 3 of my clients and had them shut down due to federal government downsizing and the closure of certain agencies. These were businesses that have been serving business to B2B and B2G for years, but the sudden loss of contracts made it impossible for them to continue, and now they're having to reorganize as sole proprietors, maybe. Many of those affected are now trying to rebuild, some transition either to self-employment as mentioned, or their employees are looking to transition to other type of services, more likely to be self-employed individuals themselves as well. A tax on essential business services will only make it harder for those that are transitioning from the downsizing of the federal government moving forward. For small businesses already struggling with revenue declines and rising costs, this tax would add an unnecessary burden, potentially leading to closures, job losses, as well as reduced business investment in Maryland. At a time when we should be supporting businesses in economic recovery, especially for those that's on the border, this bill does the opposite. For these reasons, I respectfully urge an unfavorable report on SB 1045 due to the harm and the impact it's going to have on the Maryland business community. Thank you.
Hi, thank you for the time. My name is Greg Brown, president of Monoxy Hospitality in Frederick, Maryland. Prior to jumping off the entrepreneurial cliff, I was involved with corporations. I was plant controller, plant manager. My last role in corporation was in 2017. I essentially served in the capacity of CFO for a $1.5 billion division. I bring that up because, as you guys suggested, I mean, some things that I would be looking at. One, for my businesses, this bill will cost me tens of thousands of dollars. It just will. I think everyone's already articulated that. I would like to bring up, so a lot of this is supposed to go to the blueprint. So my questions with the blueprint is, why does Maryland already spends about 40% more on a per student basis versus other states? So I would be trying to understand that question. I don't necessarily think that the amount of money we spend on students correlates to positive outcomes for our students. So I would be looking at the waste or potentially fraud and abuse in our education system. Secondly, state of Maryland spends $67 billion, I think is the current budget we're looking at. Our neighbor, Pennsylvania, spends about $40 billion. So $67 billion over 6 million people in Maryland. $40 billion over 12 million people in Pennsylvania. So we basically spend about we charge our taxpayers about 300% more in Maryland than we do in Pennsylvania. So again, I would tend to try to bridge the gap and understand why it costs us $27 billion more to provide services for half the people. So I would be looking at that and trying to cut spending. Also, I would just iterate, a recent poll in the Baltimore Sun, over 70% of Marylanders say that we need to cut spending. It's not about cutting and growing our revenue, it's about cutting spending. Less than 4% said we should be considering increasing spending right now. So I think that with that, I give an unfavorable report on this, and I would really encourage us to put on different glasses and look at how we run our government more efficiently.
Good evening, Vice Chair and committee, and thank you for your time and attention. My name is Trey English with Brooks Self Tire and Auto Centers, and a proud member of the Maryland Retailers Alliance. Restraints on growth from the poor economy are something business leaders can combat and have done so in the past. However, we are still recovering from COVID loans and losses, a poor economy, increased payroll due to a misunderstanding between a starting wage and a living wage, now endless fees and taxes with no relief in sight. Sadly, my best advice to any entrepreneur considering opening a small business is not in Maryland unless you are a nonprofit with government contracts. Our family business started back in 1943 in Baltimore. 4 generations later, we cannot afford to expand and grow in our beloved state when every other surrounding state has better opportunities. But who will this tax increase really hurt the most? The middle class and lower income citizens, that's who. Small businesses are the leading employers in Maryland. When employers are forced to cut back, payroll is first affected, price increases are second, and moving out of state is the third and final stage. How can this help Maryland's economy in the long run? This tax strategy, I believe, is like putting a Band-Aid on an ever-worsening wound. We need to re-examine our spending issues before middle class is just a dream for Maryland's hardworking citizens. I urge you to reconsider this option for revenue. I project that this will cause long-term damages that will outweigh and cost more than the revenue gains. I worry about Maryland's future as a father and a member of a family business that would like to be around for another 82 years. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Good afternoon, committee chair and committee. My name's Teresa Elin, and I have a trucking company, Sonny's Trucking, down in southern Prince George's County in Aquasco, Maryland. I believe I'm in the district of Senator Jackson. We have approximately six trucks. We have done business for maybe the last few years on 2 trucks, but paying for 4, unable to pay for the repairs and maintenance that's needed to get them on the road and operating according to the rules and regulations of the FMCSA. We haul aggregate materials, to build and grow the company. And the thing I really want to highlight for this bill that will hurt us would be in the place of truck repairs and maintenance. Because we just had a truck that we had to replace a motor, cost us $18,000, could have cost us up to $35,000. We can't put that on layaway, and we can't make payments. We have to come up with the full amount all at once. And so it did take us time to put other trucks on the road. And when we did, we were able to receive drivers, and they were able to go. So it will hurt us in the place of truck repairs and maintenance on that cost that we would have to pay over the bill. We also have to outsource things of accounting and payroll and things of that nature. That 2.5% could hurt us, on top of all the other tax liabilities and tax obligations that we have to pay. This could be the straw that breaks the camel back in small businesses and in the trucking industry as we continue to move forward to grow the industry. And what I like about it the most is we're riding down the road with our children or our grandchildren. My husband can say, hey, I took loads over there. Hey, I built that Wawa right there. Look at that neighborhood. Oh, look at the children that are playing in the neighborhood. He took part in it. Or my grandchild will come home and say, Nana, Papa and I went over. You know when we had the birthday party? I remember Papa and I took loads over there. So that was something just to have to keep in the trucking industry to keep us afloat. I strongly oppose this bill.
Melvin Thompson with the Restaurant Association. I think you did call my name. Thank you. Sorry I was late, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the committee. Melvin Thompson, Restaurant Association of Maryland. We're also opposed to this legislation for all the reasons you've heard. The services that would affect us, payroll, accounting, marketing, those kinds of things. But I also want to mention that for our industry in particular, our commercial equipment for cooking and refrigeration, hood systems, ventilation, water heating systems, all those things require continuous maintenance and repairs, which would be subject to this tax. And these are things that we are forced to maintain in order to comply with food safety and sanitation regulations. So it's not optional. If we don't maintain these things, the health department can shut us down. Many restaurants are continuing to struggle to survive as they face rising costs and lower customer traffic. And in the last 4 years, food costs for the average restaurant have increased about 29%, and labor costs have increased about 31%. With an average pre-tax profit margin of just 3 to 5%, higher costs force restaurants to increase menu prices to remain profitable. But increasing menu prices can drive away customers. The proposed B2B tax on services will force restaurants to decide between menu price increases or other cost-cutting measures, both of which could negatively impact the customer dining experience. So for these reasons, we oppose this legislation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice Chair. I just want to, because you mentioned it, Mr. Brown, I feel like I have to kind of set the record straight. Only about 11% of this tax would go to the Blueprint Fund, just to be clear. That is not what is driving this conversation. It is certainly an expense that is on our books for the long term, but it is it is fulfilled until '27. So that is not what's driving this. And the other thing that I wanted to mention is with regard to Pennsylvania, they have separate taxes in school districts in Pennsylvania. And so it's really hard, and I know, we're all sensitive to our neighbors, but it's really hard to compare apples to apples because, and in Virginia too, I mean, Virginia comprehensively is at about 3/4% less than we tax, and they have separate transportation taxes. So it's way more complicated.
Yeah, I mean, I brought that up, specifically Pennsylvania. I moved to Maryland from Pennsylvania in 2022, so I lived in Pennsylvania. So I have a very good understanding of the overall cost structure and how the tax revenues are paid. And I can tell you that the Maryland taxation far outpaces Pennsylvania significantly.
Thank you all very, very much.
Bruce? If you were called, well, you don't know if you were called. You don't know if you were called, right?
He was going to call by you.
Yeah, come on up. Come on up.
Ladies first.
Kurt McCauley.
Did we do call him? Call him? I don't think we've called you yet.
Okay.
Bruce, or whoever.
I was ladies first.
Of course.
I just feel gracious that he called me a lady. Thanks, Bruce.
I used to call you Madam Secretary. I used to call you Delegate.
For the record, Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, my name is Kelly Schultz. I'm the CEO of the Maryland Tech Council. And I will just start out by saying it was a lot more fun to be in here last week with all of you talking about good stuff with economic development. I would prefer to do all of that kind of stuff from now on. But I did feel compelled, and I won't take my full 2 minutes, just to let you know that my industry partners, our members, are very susceptible to all of the changes that are happening in the country right now, not just here in Maryland. And I feel compelled to make sure that we all know that these industries that the governor has deemed to be the lighthouse industries for growth in this state are being challenged, not by just us here. And with the difficult job and the difficult choices that we have to make every single day in policy making, and I don't envy you this year at all. But there are outside forces that are putting Maryland in a very specific, difficult position when it comes to industries like life sciences and technology in general. And all of those assets that we have boasted about and those resources that we have boasted about for as long as I've been in this business, maybe even as long as Bruce has been in this business, they are going to go away, or they're going to be diminished to some point, and they're not going to be the assets and the resources that we have been able to count on for the future. And I know that those members at those industries that I feel so compelled to be able to support and honor them because of the resources they put into workforce development, because of the young people that they want to bring in from all over the state to start careers and jobs in biotech and cybersecurity, and to be able to do that with very minimal capacity when you're talking about underserved populations. And these are the members that want to do that. We want to be able to help them. And for all of those reasons that everybody said that came before me, I am respectfully opposing this piece of legislation. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. For the record, Bruce Periano. I'm here on behalf of my client next to me who will be speaking, and also Maryland Storage Association. I sent around a document, so I don't want to repeat this. I'll try and be brief, but let me say a couple of things. I know you're looking for money. You're looking you're in a very tough situation. This is a very wrong tax to utilize to try to raise money to balance the budget. You're not going to realize the money that's in the fiscal note, or your analysts are telling you. Just like the tobacco taxes and the alcohol taxes, you never realize the money that was going to be there. And what you're doing, and I say this very respectfully, is by putting a tax on businesses to businesses, so you're double whamming, you're telling businesses, we really don't care about you. We're not really open for business. You're not helping businesses stay here, come here, and thrive. I'm not proposing this, and I'm not a fiscal analyst, but I bet if you just increase the sales tax by 1 penny, it would be paid. You wouldn't get all the aggravation you're getting. It wouldn't hurt as much, and it's on the consumer. It's not on businesses. What upsets me about this, aside from hurting my clients, is you are really almost putting the nail in the coffin that Maryland really is not a place, it's not a friendly place for businesses. And places like Huntsville, Alabama, and Tennessee are killing us. And we love this state. No one else has a Chesapeake Bay. But it comes a point where you can't eat and live on the Chesapeake Bay. You got to go somewhere else where you can afford to live. So it's got ramifications other than just the money. And please look at that. I'll just say in conclusion, I heard from so many people over in the House side. That's why I was late. It's incredible, the people, they've never come to Annapolis. They're just hardworking Marylanders, just trying to live and enjoy. And they're scared. They are scared and frightened. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice Chairman, and the members of the committee. My name is Deepak Thakur. Thank you for this opportunity and allowing me to speak today on a very important issue that's of great importance to the state's business community and the future of our economy. Let me tell you my story. I immigrated here from India 31 years back, worked few years as a programmer, went back to University of Maryland Smith Business School. Mr. Chairman, I'm also a TERP. Did my MBA, worked for 12 years as a regulator. 25 years back, nobody was talking about AI. This is when I built a largest surveillance system monitoring all 3 stock markets, identifying fraud and insider trading. Fast forward 15 years back, I started my IT company. I am running a government contracting company, but since last 8 years, I have dedicated most of my time in building solutions that uses AI. Through my technology incubator, I have funded 6 different companies. Most of them provide AI-based services, and they are all commissions and license basis. With the competition, we can only charge 5% commission or fee. Now imagine 2.5% is charged as a tax. Finance 101, my EBITDA is half, the company's valuation is half. No VCs or PE will invest in these companies. Switching to the government contracting, we are gonna be at disadvantage. Just wanna give you very quickly, the Computer Technology Industry Association gave a report, State of the Tech Workforce 2024 report said, Maryland ranked 15th in the technology job with 228,000 jobs, which is around 8% of the employment. We have 15,000 companies, which generates $37 billion revenue. But now look at and I'm sorry, I need 10 more seconds if that's okay. Look at Northern Virginia. They have just Fairfax and Arlington together, they have 15,000 companies. They generate $74 billion revenue, twice as much as us. Now, how are we going to compete with them, with CMS, FDA, NIH, when we have to pay 2.5% more cost? Because that is one of the measures for us to win those contracts. So there will be an issue, which is some of the contractors will cross the river if there is a burden on cost and if they cannot compete. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for allowing more time.
Thank you very much.
Daniel Dougherty. Steve Wise. Yeah, McCullough. Okay.
Thank you.
Why don't I call a few more while we're here? Stephen McCoy. What's that? Oh, darn it, I keep doing that. Alex Austin, Angela Rose, Paula Fernandez, Mark Schlossberg, Kirk McCauley, Terrence Stovall, Guy Peck. What's that? That was that guy there. Mhm. Alex Austin again, somehow. Dana Kaufman. Okay. Anyone who wants to begin?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Dan Doherty. I'm here representing the Maryland State Dental Association and the Maryland Society of Oral and Maxillofacial Surgeons. Excuse me. I submitted testimony that talks about the impact that this bill would have on those two associations. It also goes without saying would have a tremendous impact on the dentists that we represent and their patients. The taxes that each one of those practices will incur has to be passed on, and it will ultimately raise the cost of health care. One thing that also we need to focus on, the MSDA has a dental foundation. That foundation is run by a volunteer president and has employees whose total cost for salaries and benefits is about $150,000. They share resources with the Maryland State Dental Association in terms of accounting. This bill would disrupt that because they would have to segregate which is which. That foundation, with those modest expenses, provided last year $2 million of free dental care to the underserved. And every dollar that they would lose, it's less money that is there available to treat these underserved patients. So look at the broad aspect of the impact on the dental profession, on their patients, and on those underserved people that they try to provide free care to. And with that, I thank you for your time.
Good afternoon. For the record, my name is Dana Kaufman. I'm here on behalf of Lifespan Network, Maryland Association of Adult Day Services, and Maryland National Capital Home Care Association. These organizations provide care to the state's elderly and disabled populations, often through the Medicaid program, and they are also included under this bill. Our concerns are focused on three main points. First, as you've heard, Medicaid providers have been historically underfunded. However, with this bill, unlike other businesses, Medicaid providers do not even have the option to pass these costs on to their residents or clients, making this truly an unfunded mandate. This unfunded mandate will exacerbate the funding shortfalls that we are currently experiencing and weaken the state's Medicaid provider network. Second, even for those providers that are not participating in the Medicaid program, passing this tax on to residents and clients is challenging, given that many residents and clients are on fixed incomes. Therefore, because of the fixed incomes, this will actually increase those individuals' costs, and then the state runs the risk of these individuals spending down resources and ultimately requiring Medicaid, which will end up being at a much higher cost to the state. Third and last, compounding these concerns is the fact that for many, this will result actually on a tax on intra-company services. In healthcare, it is not uncommon to have one company provide the services, whether it be staffing, administrative, or IT services, to its related or affiliated companies that have a common thread. So it is not just a business-to-business tax that we're concerned about, but a tax where it would be generated on the same company, which would very much exacerbate these concerns, and that needs to be addressed in this bill. So thank you very much.
Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee, my name is Kirk McCauley. I represent service stations, convenience stores, and auto repair shops in the state of Maryland. I've heard this called a small business bill, and it truly is a small business bill because small business doesn't have the in-house services, and they're going to be paying a lot more out than the bigger companies. But it's also a consumer bill because small business has no choice but to pass the 2.5% down to the consumer. So they're going to be the one ends up paying. Also, our locations around the border, when they pass this down, it just makes them less competitive, sends more people across the border. Virginia, Delaware, West Virginia, they love us. They send us Christmas cards and everything, I think. But it just gets so crazy with, we lost the cigarettes sales and the tax that goes along with it. Gasoline is cheaper in every other state. Small business can't take a whole lot more. This could be the straw that breaks their back. And the border states, the border locations will really be bad. I think in Virginia, the brand new nice Mac Middleton Bridge going over into Virginia, people pour across there to go to the shopping center, big shopping center. No one lives around there, but it's a big shopping center, Walmarts and all that. And it's all Maryland customers over there. You go in the parking lot and you just count Maryland tag after Maryland tag. They're going to put a big sign up across the bridge on the way back to Maryland. Thank you, Maryland. See you next week. We can't keep giving away business because business can't survive like that. And they'll be moving to other states. And that really exacerbates the problem of employment. My members happen to employ a lot of people who are just starting out and trying to get started. And when that goes away, where are they going to go? I don't know. But thank you.
Good evening, Chair Gazone, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. My name is Angela Rose, and I am the President and CEO of the Harford County Chamber of Commerce. In front of me, I have our membership directory, which is over 630 businesses. With a quick survey, I just went through and highlighted our businesses that would be directly and indirectly impacted with this bill, and it's almost 2/3 of our businesses. And a lot of those businesses are small businesses that can't hire a lobbyist on their own or a business advocate, so they come to a Chamber of Commerce. I have done nothing but field phone calls and emails over the past few days of small business owners who love our county, love our state, but are very concerned about how this bill is going to impact them because they are already feeling the effects of an increased minimum wage. The energy increases, I've had people, business owners state that their energy bills have increased threefold. So they're very concerned that this is going to be a big hindrance on how they're successfully able to operate their business, to where it comes down to what we've heard before, and I know you've heard earlier today, a decrease in employment numbers. I run the Chamber of Commerce as an owner-operator. We have 3 people. Every year we shoot as a 501c6 to turn a nominal profit to keep money in for a rainy day. We are still recovering from COVID. Prior to COVID, utilized the ARC Northern Chesapeake for janitorial services. Just a few months ago, we were able to reinstate those services. And the way that our budget's going next year, we may have to not utilize those services anymore because of this bill. We pay sales tax, and that could be what makes or breaks us. So with that in mind, I ask that you have an unfavorable report for Senate Bill 1045. Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the committee. My name is Mark Schlossberg, and I am the president of the Maryland Association of Green Industries. We represent lawn care companies, golf course superintendents, pest control exterminators, and much of the green industry in Maryland. I definitely do not want to repeat a lot of the things that we're saying, but again, most of our businesses are small businesses. And we have not had to charge sales tax over the years. So one of the things in this bill is that we're going to have to get our system set up to charge tax just on commercial customers, and to put the 2.5% tax in there. Also, we have questions about what is a business customer. So if we're taking care of an HOA that it's all residential houses, is if we bill a management company or we bill, whatever, how we bill it, what's going to be the definition of that type of a client? Another point is we pay sales tax when we buy our fertilizer, chemicals, and when the landscapers buy mulch or whatever, we pay sales tax on that. So I don't remember if it was mentioned in this hearing over in the House, but, it is a tax on a tax also. You should be paying tax twice. We find that unreasonable. So anyway, and again, our businesses do deal with real estate. We're talking about building, housing industry. It does affect that, so it would have a negative impact on some of the charges we have for them. So with that in mind, we do ask for an unfavorable report on Senate Bill 1045. Thank you.
Good evening, Chair, Vice Chair. My name is Terrence Stovall. I'm representing the National Association of Landscape Professionals. We are the national trade organization that represents the $3.4 billion landscape industry in the state of Maryland, and an industry that employs over 30,000 employees across the state. The proposed tax increase will increase the cost for businesses of all sizes. Primarily, our members are made up of small to medium-sized operations. And a lot of the services targeted by Senate Bill 1045, such as marketing, payroll, landscape services, accounting, are services that our members already outsource and rely on third parties for. So adding that increased administrative burden and administrative costs to them would be detrimental to their bottom lines. It also places an unnecessary burden on businesses and their clients in a time of economic uncertainty. We're already dealing with inflationary costs, making it that much harder for our businesses to remain and stay operational in the state of Maryland. I urge you and the members of the committee just to carefully evaluate the implications of this legislation and reject and report unfavorably against Senate Bill 1045. Happy to stand here with our member, Mark and Lindsay, who spoke ahead of me, and I don't want to belabor the points. So just want to thank you for your time and appreciate your consideration.
Thank you. Questions for this panel? Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Senators.
Brett Langer, Stephen Sprague, Sally Taylor, Marcus Jackson, Stephen Green, Evan Richards, Adam Kane, Stephanie Helsing, Betty Knowles, Stayman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Brett Leininger, testifying on behalf of NAFA Maryland, whose many of the members are financial planners, testifying in opposition to Senate Bill 1045. You have my written testimony, just highlight the impact on small businesses, increased operational costs, reduced access to essential services. So a lot of our advisors, you think of financial planning, just giving advice to individuals, but a lot of businesses consult with financial planners, and there's a fee associated with the consulting. So concerned about the fact that the small businesses who you've heard already operating on small margins, that they would say that, we're going to forego this expense in an environment that's incredibly complex from a regulatory standpoint and from a business planning standpoint. Competitiveness, obviously, we're close to other states. My research shows that financial planners, this kind of tax is not done in any of the neighboring states. Higher prices, obviously, cost passed on to consumers. And I think just as an overarching statement, the governor's said that his vision is to grow the economy. This is how we get out of the financial crisis. This obviously would be contrary to that notion. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Adam Kane with Allegis Redwood Maxim. We're home to some of Maryland's most iconic brands in the state, including Aerotech, Tech Systems, Erickson Senior Living, Trade Point Atlantic, and Maxim Healthcare. We have two essential concerns with this bill. The first, which I think you've heard of previously, is the headquartered company. Headquartered companies here would be subject to a disproportionate share of this tax. So as a Maryland-based company with all those brands here that are based here but servicing the rest of the country, we would be disproportionately affected. And the second concern is really about the half of our business is in the staffing and professional services, which would be NIAX code 5613 and affiliated codes. And that's really, as applied here, the service is employment. And so you would be taxing, the vast majority of the service tax here would be taxing wages, benefits, and actually even payroll taxes, because that's the service we're providing for the vast majority of the services here. And that's over 11,000 Marylanders that we employ in that type of industry. That will obviously increase the costs of employment and also increase the probability of wage crowd out with this tax. This would also disproportionately affect sort of the lower wage blue collar jobs, because those are the jobs that are location specific. So if you have a warehouse or distribution center or manufacturing facility here, those jobs are location based and would be subject to the tax. Some of the higher skilled functions that you've heard about, like on the tech stuff and the consulting stuff, could easily be moved out of state. So this is really a blue collar wage tax, and we think that that aspect of it doesn't represent Maryland values. So thank you very much for the opportunity to testify.
Hello, my name's Steve Green. I'm the owner of High Mountain Sports, Deep Creek Lake, Garrett County, where we've had a great ski season. I'm also the legislative chair for the Garrett Chamber, representing over 500 members. So I was down here for the PACE reception in January, and Governor Moore spoke about some tax cuts, but then he started talking about growing the economy. And I'm like, okay, we're cooking now. And then now we're back down here, and it's like, this bill would do the exact opposite of growing businesses, and the economy would slow. We're all small businesses. We got a lot on our plate. We're already dealing with minimum wage, the Maryland Healthy Families Act, the paid family medical leave that's coming down the pike. Maryland and Garrett County small businesses really could use some help and some relief. And I think sometimes it's not just the taxes, it's the regulations and getting prepared and compliant with the regulations. That's really tough, like I talked about the paid time off. We're facing a federal workers hit to our tourism industry in Garrett County. Our state tourism funds and the state heritage cuts also could potentially hurt Garrett County, while I think West Virginia is looking at spending $47 million in tourism. We're a border county, like a lot of the tax bills, that it's, as has been said, it's really easy to go to Pennsylvania or West Virginia from Garrett County. Recently, last week, I had a major vendor come in and said, after May, we're going to have an 11% tax increase on our goods, any of the orders that we do after that. So it's a tough environment to do business in right now. So I really hope you oppose this bill.
Didn't even think about it. Hi. Good evening. Thank you for having me. My name is Stephanie Helsing. I'm the president and CEO of the Greater Silver Spring Chamber of Commerce, and we represent over 320 businesses in the Greater Silver Spring area, and we are here to say that we oppose this bill. As you've heard ad nauseum at this point, and so I'm not going to belabor it. This tax will actually impact small businesses, I think, egregiously. They tend to outsource their services, including my own chamber, operate on tight margins, and cannot easily absorb additional costs. As others have mentioned, our businesses are still just trying to recover from COVID and keep their doors open. These businesses are the backbone of our economy, and increasing expenses like this could stifle their growth, hinder job creation, and harm Maryland's economic health. All things that I know when I was here for the MACE meeting with Governor Moore, he expressed interest in not doing. It should be noted that while we are located in Montgomery County, 90% of my businesses are small businesses. They're in a majority, equity focus, still enterprise economic zone today. And the chamber worries that their needs are actually not being heard and are being overlooked. We want all businesses to succeed, and for these reasons, the Greater Silver Spring Chamber of Commerce requests an unfavorable report for this bill. It is the Chamber's position that legislation will have an egregious negative impact on the small businesses, particularly the businesses that I work with every day in Silver Spring. Thank you again for your opportunity to be here.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Evan Richards. I'm the head of government and community relations for the Maryland Bankers Association. And even though direct banking services aren't directly taxed in this piece of legislation, That's banks across Maryland utilize services that are going to be subject to this proposed tax, which is why we're here in respectful opposition to Senate Bill 1045. One of the biggest reasons why banks utilize these services is to comply with federal and state banking regulations. Everything a bank does is regulated. There's no question about that, even including some of the signage that they're required to have in their branch locations. If they run afoul of these regulations, they face penalties ranging from fines to extensive legal action, which is very costly. They use these services to make sure they're continually operating in a safe and sound manner. And again, I know you've heard this from other witnesses today, but this is going to have a really big disproportionate impact on our small community banks across the state. I think of one member bank who operates one branch, has one ATM, and employs only 14 people. There's no way possible that those 14 people on staff are going to be able to guide this bank to comply with all the necessary state and federal regs. So they heavily rely on these external services for compliance. And it's, again, this bill just makes those services more expensive. So I won't belabor the point. Ultimately, these services are necessary. Banks are going to have to eat these costs. And at the end of the day, it's just going to make the cost of financial products and services more expensive. This harms mail-unders, and of course, because of that, we urge the committee to give Senate Bill 1045 an unfavorable report. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions for this matter?
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll sit on the opposite side.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair. My name is Pat Reynolds. I'm with the Council on State Taxation. And members of the committee, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to exclude you. We are a trade association representing approximately 500 or so of the largest multi-jurisdictional businesses in the U.S. And our mission is to preserve and to promote the equitable and non-discriminatory taxation of those businesses. So in other words, we are not an anti-tax group. We want to make sure that the taxes that are paid by businesses are based on fundamental principles of sound tax policy. This bill does not represent sound tax policy. If you ask any economist, they will tell you that a sales tax, optimally designed, should only be on final user consumption. So when we advocate for, in other states, when they're expanding the sales tax base, and we take a neutral position on that. We don't care how broad you want to make your sales tax base, with one exception. You should not tax business inputs. Why? Because when you tax business inputs, it creates pyramiding. You've heard a lot of talk about the tax on tax today. It creates pyramiding, which results in a lack of transparency as to the true tax rate. Lack of transparency both to the consumer as well as you as legislators. Mr. Chair, I understand that some other states tax some of the services that are in this bill, but I can tell you no other state has ever put forth a bill to tax solely business-to-business services. And when you're competing not just in the United States, but you're competing on a global scale where the rest of the industrialized world has a VAT, where all business inputs are exempt, you're currently taxing about 42% of the Maryland tax base is on business inputs. This would simply exacerbate that. And in response to the Vice Chair's question, I do have a suggestion for you, but I'm out of time. If you want to ask me about it, I'd be happy to share it. And I wish I had a study to show you how much this would raise, but Maryland should join 23 other states and become a member of the Streamlined Sales and Use Tax Agreement. I know that, that Maryland, because they are not a member of this agreement, is leaving money on the table. I cannot point you to a study to tell you how much, but I guarantee you're leaving money on the table. The Streamlined Sales and Use Tax Agreement, Senator, it was specifically mentioned in that Wayfair case you brought up a few years ago. South Dakota is a full member of the Streamlined Sales and Use Tax Agreement. And cost, our organization has long advocated for simplicity and uniformity when it comes to sales taxes. The easier you make the sales tax, the more compliance you'll have and the more money you'll have. Thank you.
Good afternoon, and thank you to the chairman and the rest of the members of the committee for having me here today. My name is Jonathan Rowland, and I am the founder and managing partner of Fells Group, a PR and marketing firm based in Baltimore. And I'm here to express my strong opposition to Senate Bill 1045. As a proud Baltimore small business, we take pride in providing jobs in our city, giving back to our community through corporate donations and sponsorships, and contributing to the renaissance of our city. In fact, our company recently made a decision to move our office to downtown to be part of the solution for reinvigorating Baltimore, downtown Baltimore. But now all that is at risk due to this legislation. As a PR and marketing firm, this legislation will crush us from both sides, those sides being our outwards revenues and internal costs. For internal costs as a small business, we outsource for our accountant, payroll, HR, photographers, videographers, and other consultants to help fill the gaps. All of those are fellow Maryland businesses, I might add. Looking at our 2024 data, this legislation will cost our business an additional $15,000 to $20,000 per year. That's less money that goes to our annual cost of living adjustments for our full-time employees, our charitable giving, and also forces us to make the painful choice of hiring out-of-state firms instead of supporting fellow Maryland small businesses like mine. On the sales and revenue side, it gets even worse. Almost a third of our revenue currently comes from clients based in Virginia and Delaware. Each year, we compete for these contracts against other firms based in those states, with a determining factor for winning being price. While 2.5% might sound like much, this legislation will certainly put it will put 100% of those revenues at risk. Losing these contracts will force us to scale back operations, lay off staff, and not be part of growing Maryland's economy. Just to close, listen, we're a small business. We try to be a good operator. When minimum wage came by, we are supported because we were paying our part-time employees $20 an hour 5 years ago. When FML came along, we were okay with it because we were already paying, we were already providing paid family to our employees because that's something we believe in as a company. This legislation will break our company. It really will. It really will. Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Tom Ballantyne with NAIOP, Maryland. We're a commercial real estate trade association here respectfully in opposition. Despite the efforts to avoid pyramiding, this bill would still inflate building costs because it taxes traffic engineering, environmental protection, and remediation services that are engaged at the earliest stages of commercial construction. The tax on facility operations, maintenance, and repair embeds a sales tax in the overhead of tenants in commercial buildings and will necessarily increase their consumer prices. The proposed rate is only 2.5%. But the revenue requirement requires taxing $40 to $50 billion in business activity every year. By 2027, sales tax increase by 22% compared to 2024. Commercial real estate pays transfer, recordation, and property taxes. This would layer on top of that. And these policies undermine the value proposition for businesses to locate and remain in Maryland at a time when commercial real estate is struggling with historically high vacancies, high interest rates, and billions of dollars in building energy performance compliance costs. So for these reasons, we are respectfully requesting an unfavorable report. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Melanie Stancliffe, president of M. Stancliffe Construction Company. I'm also MDOT certified. I've been in business 25 years in the state of Maryland in this construction company, and I had 4 companies before that. This impact on a simple $1 million contract that I would have as a general contractor, and including 3 subcontractors on that job, where I only self-perform $200,000 of that contract myself. That contract that starts at $1 million ends up at $144,000. That's $44,000 that this tax will create on $1 million. We do 90% of our work in the grocery store business. We remodel grocery stores. So this will all get passed down into your groceries. You think eggs are expensive? Guess what? They're going to go up if this goes through. This does not include any of the support services that we use. I do my own payroll, but I don't do my own accounting. My accountant takes care of that. One day per quarter of his time to process the paperwork for this particular item would cost me $800 a year. That's a big expense. It's crazy. I don't understand why you want to add this tax to it and make it fall down. To me, you're taxing labor. We already pay taxes on our labor. You're taxing, there was something else I had in here that it's tax on top of tax on top of tax. And $44,000 on $1 million contract? That's outrageous. People can't afford it, and the grocery stores are going to pass it down, so do what you got to do. Please don't support it. Thank you for your time.
Good evening, Chair, Vice Chair, Committee. For the record, my name is Tasha Cornish. I'm the Executive Director of the Cybersecurity Association, a trade association headquartered in Columbia, Maryland, and truly dedicated to strengthening Maryland's cybersecurity industry. I'm really encouraged by the business owners who took their time to show up here today, by those who have written in. Many of our members mostly concentrated in Central Maryland who would be truly impacted by this. I won't belabor the effects on them specifically. We have over 600 members, but what I will provide some insight in is the effect this will have on the cybersecurity posture of businesses in our state, which is already severely scary. So I feel like I'm here every year chairing about the 26,000 open jobs in cybersecurity. This is not something people can bring on in-house. This is not something they can afford or find talent for. So this is something they will have to now be paying 2.5% more for. So what will that do? It will increase costs for businesses that rely on cybersecurity protection. It will disincentivize investment in cybersecurity, making Maryland organizations more vulnerable, and it will hinder small businesses that may struggle to absorb additional expenses, making it harder for them to comply with security best practices, many of which they now have to prove because they need to, win those contracts. Second, Maryland is a national leader in cybersecurity with firms providing services to local businesses, government agencies. Many of our companies have left because of the unfriendly business environment in Maryland. They have moved their headquarters to places like San Antonio, Tampa, Augusta, et cetera. There are many reasons why they want to stay in Maryland. They're very committed. They are very involved in their community, but it just certainly will not become an option anymore. We will lose our competitive edge in this sector. And, just last week, I was in this committee sharing our excitement about the Decade Act. I truly hope that we continue to invest in our cornerstone industries. Thank you again, and we urge an unfavorable report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. John Fiastro here on behalf of the Cybersecurity Association with Ms. Cornish. I'm not going to repeat any of the items that she said. I will say, though, that we have at least 10 of our members who have filed testimony. More is coming in. Some of them wish to have testified today, but they could not make their calendars make it. This is kind of a recurrence of what we did as a state, or what we looked at as a state 18 years ago. Some of the members of the committee will remember the 2007 special session, in which the Assembly raised the sales and use tax and applied it to computer services. Within 6 months, the General Assembly repealed that tax. I brought up the bill file from that 2008 session, and one piece of testimony after another. I recognize many of the names of current members of the association that participated at the time, and their message is the same today, that this is detrimental to their business. It is detrimental to their thoughts on growth here in Maryland. And finally, what their long-term prospects are here. So with that, Mr. Chairman, thank you for the time. On behalf of the association, we urge an unfavorable report, and please do not repeat history here.
Thank you.
Sorry. You hit your foot?
No, you didn't.
Chair, you, am I the last one? I was called with the other panel, but there weren't enough chairs. Do you want to call me with this one, this panel? Okay, cool.
Christopher Stone, Michelle Roser, Patty, Dave Victor, Karen Sykes, Brian and Lou, Mola, Dennis, Deborah Gordon, Andrew Wilson. Mark Jackson.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Rebecca Snyder. I'm the Executive Director of the Maryland-Delaware DC Press Association. And we sit before you in opposition to this bill specifically because of its tax on advertising. Advertising is a business driver. It's an element of growth. I think you heard in the last panel someone from the PR industry talking about how his business would be crushed by the inputs used to produce his services. News media would be crushed because budgets for advertising are not fungible. If you have $10,000 in your budget for advertising, if someone taxes that $10,000, that money comes out of the advertising spend. It doesn't expand to meet the service like it would have to do for, employee costs or other elements. So news media relies on advertising revenues to preserve their ability to produce quality journalism that focuses on its communities. By taxing advertising, which 40 states have actually considered, rejected. Florida had an advertising tax some years ago, wound up repealing it 5 months later because of the crushing blow of the slowing economy. Advertising taxes really don't work that well. It's difficult to understand, at what point, you're taxing the photographer that's taking the picture, the service that's creating the ad, and then the advertising itself. By the time that service gets to the consumer, I don't know how many layers of tax are on there, but it's a lot. And so I urge you to, at the very least, exempt advertising. We would prefer the entire bill be scrapped, and look at ways to really support Maryland's journalism and economy. So we urge an unfavorable report, and thank you for your consideration.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My name is Chris Stone, and I'm representing eMoxie Data Solutions as one of its co-founders, and I am also the board chair for the Harford County Chamber of Commerce. eMoxie is a small website development and technology company. This is our 20th year in business, and we've been in Maryland since the beginning, and I really don't want that to change. The proposed bill would cause about $18,000 of extra cost for us, either through direct increases from our B2B services that we utilize or the services that we provide. The tax would result in price increases to our customers, pullback from local spending and community support, while creating uneven footing with our competitors in surrounding areas. Our competitors don't operate with a 2.5% penalty. That's just my business, though. Speaking on behalf of the almost 650 chamber members in Harford County that I represent, they would be affected in much of the same way. This tax would result in around $15 million being removed from our local economy on a yearly basis. And that's just from chamber members. This would affect community sponsorships, local spending, and employment in the area. It would have a very large adverse effect. I'm obviously deeply opposed to this bill. The answer simply cannot be more taxes. Thank Thank you for your time and consideration. I very clearly oppose this bill. I would look out for the other small businesses. Everybody says that we are the backbone, but it doesn't feel that way sometimes. It feels like when there is a deficit, it is a take situation. I would, in my business, in a situation like that, we reduce expenses, and I would consider that to be a useful approach. Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Marcus Jackson, Director of Government Affairs with the Associated Builders and Contractors of Maryland, representing over 1,500 member companies across the state. I'm here to express our strong opposition to Senate Bill 1045. I'm going to be brief in the interest of time, but I wanted to share with you some of our concerns. This bill, if passed, would have a profound negative impact on the construction industry, on the construction sector here in Maryland. Small contractors and subcontractors, which are the backbones of our industry, will disproportionately be affected. These businesses often operate on thin margins and will struggle to absorb the increased compliance costs and tax burden, potentially leading to job loss and business closures. The construction industry is a vital engine in Maryland for its economy, driving job creation, infrastructure development, the overall economic growth to our state. We understand the need for revenue generation, but we believe that this bill will have unintended and detrimental consequences. For that reason, we, the Associated Builders and Contractors of Maryland, and our 1,500 plus members, we urge a unfavorable report on Senate Bill 1045.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice Chairman, members of the committee, thank you for both your endurance and for allowing me the opportunity today to testify on SB 1045. My name is Andrew Wilford, and I'm the Director of the Interstate Commerce Initiative at the National Taxpayers Union Foundation. For nearly 5 decades, NTUF has striven to give policymakers the tools to make informed pro-taxpayer policy choices. Unfortunately, SB 1045 violates core principles of good tax policy by imposing a hidden tax increase on Maryland consumers. Now, I won't be the 40th person today to explain to you what tax pyramiding is, but I do want to make the point that, I think you've heard from a lot of businesses today, and, their concerns they're raising are very valid and very correct. But I don't want you to get the impression that because you're hearing from businesses, this is not an issue for everyday working class Marylanders. This tax will hit them just as hard. At a time when, average Maryland families are continuing to struggle with the impacts of inflation, with looming tariffs, the last thing they need is another increase to their costs of living. And make no mistake, no matter who this tax is technically assessed on, it will be average Marylanders who pay. Just want to leave you with one final thought. Several of you have mentioned that there's been a lot of tough decisions, tough conversations going on here, and that's certainly, I'm sure that's the case. This is a very tough job. But I would respectfully urge you to consider that if this bill passes, there will be a lot of tough kitchen table conversations happening around Maryland as well, as Marylanders lose their small businesses, lose their jobs, see prices of everyday goods rise even more than they already have because of this bill. These are things that that Maryland families are going to have to deal with, and I would just urge you to consider that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the committee. My name is Jake Whitaker on behalf of Maryland's hospitals and health systems, here in respectful opposition to this legislation. And so although Maryland's hospitals are nonprofit organizations and generally exempt from sales and use taxes, we do have some concerns about the bill as drafted. The bill mandates that business entities are subject to this tax, but business entities aren't defined in the bill or in the tax code. Additionally, similar bills like the one last year were very specific and explicit about what they specified were exempt from that legislation. And the reason we're being so cautious is because the unique nature of Maryland's total cost of care model. So every single year, Maryland's hospitals get a set budget that they have to work within every single year. So what this means basically is if a hospital has an unexpected cost and they have less resources, that's less resources for patients. So basically, if hospitals are subject to this legislation, there will be less resources for caring for patients. And so for the aforementioned reasons, we respectfully request an unfavorable report. Thank you.
Questions for this panel? Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Is there anyone sitting here who has signed up to testify? Who has not testified yet?
Me, Mr. Chair.
Do you want to go first?
Sure.
All right. Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Sharon Sykes, and on behalf of the American Hotel and Lodging Association, which represents every segment of the hotel industry, we ask that you oppose Senate Bill 1045. This increased expense to operate would lessen our industry's competitiveness and threaten economic growth of Maryland's lodging industry. Costs are rising faster than revenues, making growth investment and job creation tougher in Maryland. Small business owners have been struggling as rising costs, compounded by high inflation and interest rates, make it difficult to stay open and serve guests. Everything from operations, maintenance, sales, marketing, and IT rose nearly 5% in 2024. Virginia and Delaware do not impose similar taxes on business services, creating an immediate disadvantage for Maryland hoteliers. Meeting planners will look at the bottom line and take their business to a neighboring state. Leisure travelers will go elsewhere for their family vacation. Government travel provides a lot of business to Maryland hotels. Government employees will feel the pressure to book elsewhere if Maryland hotels cost more than options in a nearby state. For these reasons, we urge an unfavorable report. Thank you for your time.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, committee members. Good to see you all again. I missed all of the testimony earlier. We were over in the House. I know you heard some tough testimony. I know you're taking a lot of arrows. But I would like to say, first of all, Eddie Pounds for the record. Just want to thank you all, whether you have a D behind your name or an R, because you're working together to find solutions to come up with new revenue to address our fiscal climate. So thank you. So again, for the record, my name is Eddie Pounds. I'm here today in my capacity as the president for the Maryland Government Relations Association, which is at its core a nonprofit organization whose aim is to educate the public about the art and science of lobbying. You have our written testimony before you, which goes into detail about why or how this measure would negatively impact the lobbying profession should it pass. Both my board, the MGRA board, and our general membership expressed a lot of different opinions about the impact of this B2B bill. But one thing became apparent to me, and it was a reoccurring theme, which you probably heard today or tonight, and that this really isn't a B2B. It can never really be a B2B because there's always a C that you have to consider, whether that's the consumer, the customer, the client, or in some or a lot of instances, the constituent, who mostly is impacted by this bill should it pass. Again, we appreciate the fact that you all are trying your very best to find new revenue, but we respectfully ask for an unfavorable report. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions for this panel? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now we have virtual, Steve McCloy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I serve as the Senior Vice President at Patient First. We offer primary and urgent care medical services to patients at 24 locations in the state of Maryland. In 2024, we treated patients during more than 1 million visits. About 260,000 of those were Medicaid patients. We are organized as a group of affiliated entities in which one entity employs medical professionals to deliver healthcare services, and an affiliate provides business services in support of that healthcare delivery. These related entities do business as patient first, and neither offers services to third parties. This is not an unusual structure in healthcare where corporate practice and medicine rules limit a corporation's ability to employ physicians and other healthcare providers. This bill would make those intra-company services taxable when they would not be if they were provided within a single corporation. We are requesting an amendment to exempt intra-company services defined as services provided between business entities that are consolidated into a parent entity under generally accepted accounting principles or GAAP and file and pay taxes through that parent entity. Intracompany sales exemptions like this are recognized elsewhere in Maryland law. For example, companies engaged in intracompany sales of prescription drugs are not required to register as a pharmacy or a wholesale distributor. If Patient First's intracompany services become taxable, we will have no choice but to reassess our current development plans and potentially prioritize development in other states. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Megan Stokes.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I'm Megan Stokes. I serve as the State Policy Director for the Computer and Communications Industry Association. We're a not-for-profit tech trade association. I'm here to express my strong opposition to Senate Bill 1045. We understand that Maryland faces significant budget challenges, and there are many hard decisions that you are making. But implementing a business-to-business service tax would create significant long-term problems for Maryland's economy and competitiveness. You've already heard, I won't belabor the point, but we understand there'll be a disproportionate impact on small businesses, possibly creating a competitive disadvantage in the region, and that there will be a cascading tax effect. But I do want to mention, as a Maryland resident since I was 5 years old, and someone who many, many years ago, so long ago that the General Assembly had an indoor smoking room, I was an intern for the House Judiciary Committee. And I know that every senator and delegate in the General Assembly has their heart in the right place, and they have been racking their brains about ways to close the deficit. I appreciate the work that you are doing and will continue to do for our state. We just need policies that encourage business growth and economic expansion. A thriving business community naturally will generate increased tax revenue through job creation and economic activity. We appreciate the committee's consideration of these comments and request an unfavorable report. Thank you.
Thank you. Nick Sharps.
Good afternoon, esteemed committee members, and greetings from the westernmost reaches of Maryland. My name is Nick Sharps. I'm the interim president of the Garrett County Chamber of Commerce, and I am testifying today on behalf of our 540 members in opposition of Senate Bill 1045. Our membership accounts for half of all businesses operating in Garrett County and serves as a reasonable sampling of the industries that can be found here. At minimum, 39% of our members qualify as services to be taxed under the proposed legislation, and the rest of our members rely on those critical services. I realize that a 2.5% tax might seem minor to some, given our current fiscal situation in Maryland, but for many of our businesses scraping by on 3 or 4% margins, any additional burden can be the difference between life or death. Small businesses are the foundation of Maryland's economy, and with the exception of around 17 larger firms, that's all we have here in Garrett County. With such thin margins, many will be unable to absorb the cost of this new tax without scaling back their staff, sidelining plans to expand, raising prices on an already weary consumer base, or relocating. As you've heard numerous times today, Maryland is already ranked as the third most expensive state to do business in. We desperately need to change the perception that Maryland is not a business-friendly state so that we can attract more investment and expand the tax base. For these reasons, we respectfully urge the committee to issue an unfavorable report for Senate Bill 1045, and you have my sincere thanks for this opportunity to speak and your time today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions for any of those online testifiers? Thank you very much. With that, that concludes the hearing for today. We're on the floor, I guess, at 7.